Good morning, everybody. Straight away, I'm placing an order to sell Canadian dollar. The order placed for 135,989. So order placed to sell short Canadian dollar at 135,989.
Mike's mother of all marinades.
I love my homemade barbecue marinades. The only problem is no one else does. So today I'm trying something new. Caramelized crispy pork belly tumbled in sea salt, red chili, black pepper and sugar. And sweet sticky chicken fillets in tangy mango, coconut and lime. This is amazing.
Yeah, because you didn't make it.
Introducing the new Fire Pit range, exclusively at Tesco. Food Love Stories, brought to you by Tesco. Available in the majority of larger stores while stocks last.
We saw red on the screen in Europe yesterday. The US ended in the green, and futures point to another day in positive territory. S&P E-minis up almost 0.7%, Dow futures up 0.9%, Nasdaq futures up 0.4%. So you are seeing some clear risk on across equity markets. The 10-year yield is steady on a 62 handle. The 10-year bund yield goes nowhere at -44. The 10-year gilt yield edges up a basis point. In FX, the risk on is also evident in the fact that you're seeing other commodity currencies outperform. Norwegian krone, Aussie dollar, the Kiwi's up there as well. So is the pound, but actually all G10 currencies gaining against the dollar today. And I'll finish with oil ahead of the JMMC. We're seeing that print positive. WTI up 0.7% at 40.56. Brent at 43.15, up 0.6%. You've also got the API data that's feeding into that gain as well. Roger.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see where oil goes today on all that basis. Let's have a quick look at what the stocks are to watch this morning with Kit Rees joining us down the line. Now, Kit, good morning to you. ASML, as Nera mentioned there, very interesting. I suppose you'd expect it given the sector of the market they're in and what's been happening, but their outlook beat the expectations.
Yes, so that's a positive for the company. ASML is a real bellwether for the semiconductor industry, given it supplies firms like Samsung and TSMC, and it makes extreme ultraviolet lithography equipment, or EUV, which are these latest machines. I'm just looking at the shares. They actually turn negative now after a positive open. So the key metric is the company's outlook, and its forecast for net sales for the third quarter beat analyst estimates. But some analysts have said, in some of the research notes this morning, that they wanted to see some guidance for EUV sales in 2021, so perhaps people are looking for just a little bit more going forward from them there.
Yeah, and if that's one sector of the market that's doing well out of the current situation, the luxury end rather less so. Burberry, their comparable retail sales performed, well, it must have been better than expected, but the market doesn't seem to like it much.
No, the shares are down 6% there, sort of the worst performers on the FTSE 100. I mean, it's been really tough for the luxury and retail market, given that people haven't been able to go to stores and they depend so much on the physical spaces for their sales. But yeah, I mean, the sales in the quarter, they performed better than expected, but they did fall 45%, so still quite a big drop. And the company's also taking some more cost-cutting measures, including streamlining its front office and stores following the lockdown. So I guess, still just very tough environment for them there.
And finally, ASOS, expecting the profit to hit the top end of expectations this year.
Yeah, so you can really see the difference in performance in different areas. The retail sector, so ASOS is an online business, and it saw sales in recent months rise 10%. The shares are up more than 4%, so it's been very well received update. And as you said, the company saying it expects its profit to reach the top end of market expectations, a very positive sign.
Position open on Canadian dollar. It's a short position from 1.35989.
Early clinical results from Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. US federal researchers say it produced antibodies to the coronavirus in all patients tested in an initial safety trial. More from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
According to the results published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the neutralizing antibody levels produced were equivalent to the upper half of what's seen in patients who get infected with the virus and recover. The Moderna vaccine is one of the farthest along for COVID-19. While stimulating production of neutralizing antibodies does not prove a vaccine will be effective, it is considered an important early step in testing. According to the report by researchers from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, the side effects reported were not severe enough in the majority of patients to preclude further testing. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
On to another of our top stories. The UK's ban on Huawei from its next-generation mobile networks. Well, it got a swift response from Beijing. China's ambassador in London called it disappointing and wrong. Phone companies have been barred from installing new equipment from the Chinese company from the end of this year. Speaking to Bloomberg, Huawei UK Executive Vice President Jeremy Thompson said the decision was disappointing.
We are urging the UK government to reconsider and give us more time to identify the mitigations to the sanctions that the US has implemented. And we feel later on this year we will have some mitigations, and we'd like to talk to the UK government about.
That was Huawei UK Executive Vice President Jeremy Thompson, and we'll have more from that interview later in the programme.
U.S. Secretary of State Michael Pompeo welcomed the move, saying it advances transatlantic security, but it is a further blow to British relations with China, which has warned Boris Johnson will face consequences if the UK treats it as a hostile partner.
Meanwhile, the tit-for-tat between the US and China continues. President Trump's ordered an end to Hong Kong's special trading status with the United States. Bloomberg's Brian Curtis has more from Hong Kong.
It once seemed unthinkable, but the president carried through with his earlier threat. He also signed legislation that would sanction Chinese and Hong Kong officials. It's all tied to China imposing a national security law here. So now Hong Kong gets no different treatment from China in these areas: tariffs, visas, extradition, license exceptions on certain exports, police exchanges, and even the Fulbright program. China issued an immediate rebuke and said it would sanction U.S. officials. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And back to here in the UK, Chancellor of the Exchequer Rishi Sunak has ordered a review of capital gains tax. That's as the Treasury will need to find ways to claw back some of the £190 billion it's poured into supporting the economy during the coronavirus crisis. The Tories pledged not to raise income tax or VAT, but a Treasury official who asked not to be named said the review was standard practice.
Well, we'll dig into that and much more on British politics on Bloomberg Westminster. At 12 noon UK time, we're going to be speaking to the DUP MP and parliamentary leader for the DUP party, Geoffrey Donaldson. We'll also get the latest public opinion poll on how the government's handling the virus crisis. We'll get that from Dr. Michelle Harrison, Global CEO of Kantar's Public Division. You can catch that live at noon on London DAB, or you can download the podcast on Apple Music or your preferred radio app later.
And in banking news this morning, JP Morgan, Citi and Wells Fargo all reported earnings yesterday, setting aside $47 billion in 2020 for bad debt. That's more than they had set aside in the last 3 years combined. For Wells Fargo, the biggest loan loss provision in its history led to the bank's first net loss since 2008 and an 80% cut to its dividend.
And we'll get, of course, Goldman Sachs releasing its second quarter earnings, much anticipated, coming up later. Right, let's get the latest global news now from Leanne Gerrans. Leanne, you begin with what's happening in Japan.
Yes, indeed, Roger. So the Japanese capital, Tokyo, has raised its COVID-19 warning to the highest level as infections spread. Meanwhile, New Zealand's Prime Minister says the country must be prepared for the virus to come back. And as US cases surge, the country's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, is warning young people could be spreading the coronavirus.
Even if you get infected and have no symptoms at all and never get sick, you are inadvertently propagating the pandemic. You are part of the problem and not the solution.
Crossing over to Europe, Scotland is taking its biggest step so far in the country's exit from lockdown. Today, Scottish bars and restaurants can restart indoor service, while hairdressers, museums and galleries can also reopen. But the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has this warning.
You will be asked to provide contact details. You should cooperate with anyone who is asking you to do that. In fact, if you're not prepared to provide your contact details, my message to you is pretty blunt. Don't go to these places because you could be putting others at greater risk.
Now, German Chancellor Angela Merkel is signalling she could be willing to compromise in negotiations on the proposed European Union Recovery Fund. Bloomberg's Charlie Devereux has that story.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she's prepared to compromise on a European recovery plan that will be negotiated this weekend in Brussels. EU leaders will meet this Friday to discuss a €750 billion plan that's meeting opposition from some members led by the Dutch. The Spanish Prime Minister was more forceful than his German counterpart after a meeting on Tuesday, saying the bloc must reach an agreement this month. In Madrid, this is Charlie Devereux for Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And in France, Emmanuel Macron has committed to spending an extra €100 billion towards resurrecting Europe's second biggest economy, which has been ravaged by coronavirus. Speaking after a Bastille Day ceremony yesterday, the president tried to present the virus as an opportunity to invest in sectors that will matter in the future. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg NAIRA.
Leanne, thank you so much. Up next, US-China relations sour yet again, equities in the green. This is Bloomberg.
Debbie Hart is president of BioNJ, which represents the interests of more than 400 New Jersey-based biotech companies. She's also a strong voice in the biotech sector, supporting research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology. She sees NJIT as a valuable partner in attracting venture capital and biotech startups to the Garden State.
So the number one reason that companies come here to New Jersey for the biotech industry is for our talent. We estimate that there were about 30 biotech companies in the early 90s in New Jersey, about 80 in 1998. Today there are more than 400. And that growth continues, and it's come from every possible angle. Other countries, other states, they've spun out of our academic institutions as well as our biotech and our pharma companies, and we expect that growth to continue long into the future. And NJIT is a pipeline for talent, for companies, for entrepreneurs to do that important work.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
When the market is unpredictable, BAM gives you certainty. In the face of volatility and illiquidity, BAM-insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption, like the one we're experiencing right now. BAM. Build America Mutual. Ask your broker about BAM-insured municipal bonds.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Now, the coronavirus pandemic has transformed the landscape of healthcare with rapid shifts to telehealth. Joining us now to discuss the surge in demand and what lies ahead for telemedicine is Amir Rubin. He is the CEO of One Medical. It is a San Francisco-based primary care platform. Amir, great to have you. And I guess the first simple question is, what demand shifts have you been seeing really since February, March, when the coronavirus pandemic really came to a head here, and how that's transitioned now into sales in July?
Yeah, great to be with you, Taylor. So at One Medical, we combine digital health and multi-modalities for digital health. That could be synchronous video, on-demand video chat. It could be messaging. It could be structured questions with in-person care and testing. So we were kind of set up pretty well to deal with COVID. So during this time, we saw a huge influx of digital health, but not just video chats, but, hey, can I get screened for COVID? Do I have the symptoms? And then we saw people get on our app and book testing. And we set up testing sites in full PPE across the country in our various locations. So certainly saw an influx of demand there.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg QuickTake. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Kilhuff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and there's green across the screen for European stock markets this morning. We're seeing the Stock 600, the FTSE and the CAC 40 higher by 0.8%, the DAX gaining 0.9%, US futures also pointing to a higher open. It follows a bit of a risk-on rally in markets earlier this morning after Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine produced antibodies in all patients. However, we did see Chinese equities close lower after the US ended the Hong Kong's special status. The Hang Seng still trading and currently down 0.3%. In stock specifics, I'm keeping a close eye on Burberry this morning, plunging 5% here in London after saying first quarter sales were down 45%. That's slightly better than expected, but still quite a bad number coming out of the luxury retailer. Now, the risk-on mood that we saw in the markets is benefiting commodity currencies, in particular the NOK gaining 0.4%, Aussie and Kiwi dollars also bid this morning. The dollar in turn weaker, down 0.2%. The yen gaining to 107.1. Sterling at 125. The euro at 114 this morning. In the bond markets, 10-year treasury yields are holding at 62 basis points. 10-year bund yields at negative 45. 10-year gilt yields slightly higher at 6.
I'm placing stop on profit for Canadian dollar. Let's see, it should. No, I cannot. I should have at least a few pips below. Okay. No, I have to wait. I can't place stop on profit yet.
With one of the creatures holding a bottle of hand sanitizer. Since the artist posted a video of his work inside a Circle Line train, TfL has removed the art. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg QuickTake, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, President Trump has ordered an end to Hong Kong's special status with the US. The legislation sanctions Chinese officials responsible for cracking down on dissent in the city and led to immediate vows of retaliation from Beijing. Meanwhile, tensions are mounting on other fronts, with the UK's ban on Huawei drawing a fresh rebuke from China. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg's senior editor, Derek Wallbank. Derek, great to have you with us. In terms of the response from China, we've heard about countermeasures, but what can we actually expect?
Well, you know, it's interesting. China is sort of taking it from a lot of different sides here. In terms of the U.S. move on Hong Kong, this is a thing that I think, you know, is quite significant. I think that this is one of those things where market folks had hoped that these moves would stay fairly symbolic. This is not symbolic at all. This is a fundamental rethink of the United States relationship vis-a-vis Hong Kong. The order and the legislation that President Trump signed basically set out several ways that Hong Kong had sort of a special relationship with the United States, different than China. That's everything from passport rules down to like training the Hong Kong police force, things like that. And then actually asks for the administration to go further. It instructs cabinet secretaries to look through your own departments, figure out all of the ways.
Here we go. Stop on profit for Canadian dollar at 135.969. So I'm placing stop on profit for Canadian dollar at 135.969.
not very serious. I would say certainly not treated as any sort of a deterrent by the United States. Hong Kong could be more serious. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, it was interesting. Marco Rubio, I think he was one of those on the target, was actually sort of thinking this was almost a campaign contribution for him, having China take this action towards him. But I suppose the interesting thing with this, Derek, is that China is definitely not in the mood to take any of this lying down. They've got enemies on all sides, really, now, haven't they?
Yeah, that's really true, and a lot of that is based off of China's own stance. But if you sort of think about China and the countries that border it, you're talking about a land border dispute with India. You are talking about maritime border issues with Japan, with South Korea. Certainly Taiwan has its own conversation. You're talking about South China Sea disputes with Malaysia and with Vietnam, and et cetera. I mean, I could go on for a while. China is in this position with a lot of places. Now, the U.S. has been certainly the most vocal actor of all of this. China would very much prefer to be having one-on-one negotiations, which I think, if they're being honest, they would say are probably not clashes of military equals and not clashes of diplomatic equals in a lot of cases. But when the U.S. is involved in a lot of this, when the U.S. says, we're going to be that sort of stiff backbone, the U.S. may actually be even going further than some of those countries want to go in terms of pressing a confrontation.
Right. So that's sort of US-China relations, Derek. In terms of the UK banning Huawei from its next-generation mobile networks, we've had a swift response from China. You talked about Hong Kong not being just symbolic. It was a really serious step for the city. How serious is this move from the UK for China?
Well, I think it's a big reversal for the United Kingdom. If I sort of go back many, many years, back to when the People's Republic was trying to get recognized, the UK has been one of the countries sort of at the forefront in the Western world of trying to recognize China, trying to build along to China. And this is a really big reversal. Remember that Boris Johnson's government said that they weren't going to go the way that Donald Trump wanted to go on Huawei, but now they're going and banning Huawei, and it's really a stark reversal.
It certainly is. It's a very striking one. Derek, thank you so much. Bloomberg Senior Editor Derek Waldbank. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. More bank earnings are on the docket today as second quarter earnings season continues. Goldman Sachs and PNC are among those due to report. Ken Leon at CFRA thinks the tough times for banks are just beginning.
Unfortunately, this being the first full quarter of the impact of COVID-19, we're likely to still see weakness in the third quarter.
J.P. Morgan Chase and Citigroup turned in stronger than expected results yesterday. Wells Fargo posted its first quarterly loss since 2008. Stocks are coming off a volatile session that ended with the main averages higher. The Dow led the way, up more than 2%. Coronavirus fears could cause a crash for home prices in major U.S. cities. Economist Robert Schiller says the benefits of city living are not attracting home shoppers like they were before the pandemic. Starting today, all customers at company-owned Starbucks will need to wear a face mask, whether it's locally mandated or not. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
The market's in focus every business day. The Bloomberg Markets Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
What's the thought on Apple here?
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn. Subscribe today at BloombergRadio.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or iTunes.
Uncertain times making you question your financial future? Burden Accountants and Advisors examines the latest business trends, market conditions, and industry issues to maximize your tax advantages and help you achieve your financial goals. Let Burden serve as your trusted advisor and leverage its more than 100 years of experience to create innovative solutions to help protect you, your family, and your business. Visit burdenllp.com. That's BERDONLLP.com. Burden Accountants and Advisors. We listen, we solve, we do.
President of the Jewish Communal Fund, Zoya Ray.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
And action!
I was offered one.
Cut. That's not on the script.
I was offered one. Get in.
Ladies and gentlemen, I was offered one.
Come, boy. I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished. With over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? No. Or without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors?
Sweet.
The new Honda E with wind cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
Just one cornetto.
Ada, love, your mum's on the phone.
Give it to me. No, the phone I mean.
Ada, is that you?
Give me cornetto. Your turn, Mum. Sing it.
Oh, from Walls Ice Cream.
Yes, Mum. Love it.
Deliciously creamy, crunchy wafer cone, and the secret chocolate hidden in the tip. Connect with the ones you love this summer. There's just one Cornetto from Walls Ice Cream.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahic.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, 30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe after some weakness on Europe's benchmark yesterday. We see it bounce back today. Green on the screen, the Stock 600 up 0.8%, so certainly making up for the losses we saw yesterday. And what seems to be driving a lot of the risk appetite across European markets today is the positive progress in terms of the Moderna vaccine crossing a key milestone. So you've got the FTSE 100 up 0.9%, the CAC 40 up by the same, the DAX up almost 1%, the IBEX up 0.6%. The FTSE MIB outperforming up 1.2%. And in terms of the industry groups that are leading the gains on the Stock 600, travel and leisure and industrial goods and services, along with commodity producers outperforming. You've got some of the defensive stocks, real estate and telecoms underperforming. So that speaks to the risk appetite as well. The US entered in the green yesterday, and futures point to another day of gains. Dow futures up almost 0.9%, S&P minis up 0.6%, NASDAQ futures higher by 0.5%. The 10-year Treasury yield gives us no signal at all. It's dead steady on a 62 handle. Same for the 10-year Bund yield at negative 44. 10-year gilt yield was edging up earlier. It's now flat at 15 basis points. Edging up ever so slightly, up a basis point. You're seeing a weaker dollar in FX against all G10 currencies, but it is the commodity currencies that are outperforming. The Norwegian kroner, the Aussie dollar, the Kiwi, the pound also up there with some of the best performers. And then looking at commodities themselves, oil on the front foot, WTI up 0.9%, $40.66 a barrel, Brent at 43.24, up 0.8%. We look ahead to a JMMC OPEC Plus meeting. Expectations perhaps that they may temper an increase in output with extra oil cuts in terms of compliance. But the green you're seeing on the screen today has also something to do with the fact that we had the API data yesterday, Roger.
Right, let's go on to our top stories and the optimism in the markets. You were talking about a little bit there, at least some of the markets, was sparked by successful early clinical results from Moderna's virus vaccine. All patients produced antibodies in the trial, though some did report severe side effects. Still, the results clear an important hurdle in bringing the treatment to market quickly. And that came as more daily virus records were set in large population centres across the southern US for new cases in Texas and Los Angeles, and also fatalities in Florida.
And the other story, big story we're watching today, UK's ban on Huawei from its next-generation mobile networks got a swift response from Beijing. China's envoy to Britain called it disappointing and wrong. With more detail on the decision and the reaction, here's Bloomberg's Charles Capel.
I'm moving further my stop on profit for Canadian dollar to 135.939. Okay, stop on profit for 935.939.
In London, Charles Capel, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, the tit-for-tat between the US and China continues. Donald Trump issued an order to end Hong Kong's special status with the US.
Well, watch what happened. Not a good situation. Their freedom's been taken away, their rights have been taken away, and with it goes Hong Kong, in my opinion, because it will no longer be able to compete with free markets. A lot of people will be leaving Hong Kong, I suspect. And we're going to do a lot more business because of it, because we just lost one competitor.
Well, the move in the wake of Beijing's imposition of a sweeping new security law in Hong Kong did draw a rebuke from China. It also adds a fresh uncertainty for business in the financial hub. Trump's also signed legislation that would sanction Chinese officials who are responsible for cracking down on dissent in the city.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. As global coronavirus cases go over 13 million, the Japanese capital, Tokyo, has raised its warning to the highest level as infections spread. Meanwhile, New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is urging the nation to be prepared for the virus to come back into the community. Bloomberg's Tracy Withers has all those details.
She cited places such as the Australian state of Victoria, where the re-emergence of the virus has pushed the city of Melbourne back into lockdown as a cautionary tale. New Zealand officials are developing plans for local or regional lockdowns if needed, and will do everything possible to avoid the entire country returning to a nationwide lockdown, Ardern said. In Wellington, Tracy Withers, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Crossing over to Europe, Angela Merkel says she's prepared to compromise in difficult talks on assembling a European recovery plan. The German Chancellor spoke alongside Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez as the two met in Berlin yesterday. On Friday, EU leaders will gather in Brussels for the first time since the pandemic swept the continent. On the table is that recovery plan backed by Germany and France, which is seen as a show of unity to nations hardest hit by coronavirus, such as Italy and Spain. Now in France, President Emmanuel Macron has committed to spending an extra 100 billion euros towards resurrecting Europe's second biggest economy. Bloomberg's Anya Nussbaum says the plan will be detailed at the end of August.
Macron sounded confident that the economic ravages resulting from the coronavirus will turn out to be an opportunity to invest in industries that will matter in the future. While he has repeatedly pledged to reinvent himself following months of criticisms over his handling of the COVID crisis, Macron mostly stuck to his guns. He promised new measures to boost youth employment, and he left the door open to postponing his flagship pension reform. In Paris, Anya Nussbaum, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And this morning, a sculpture of a Black Lives Matter protester has replaced the statue of slave trader Edward Colston, which was toppled in Bristol last month. The figure of Jan Reid was put up at dawn by the artist Mark Quinn without approval from local authorities. This follows a wave of Black Lives Matter protests here in the UK and around the world. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, thanks for that. Let me just bring you some lines we've been getting from the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Hua Chunying, who is responding, of course, to what's been happening in terms of America's moves with regard to China. They say US attempts to obstruct Hong Kong's national security law won't succeed, and they're describing what the US is doing as a violation of international law. Anyway, let's now come on to what's been going on with bank earnings. JP Morgan, Citi and Wells Fargo all reported yesterday, setting aside $47 billion in 2020 for bad debt. That's more than they'd set aside in the last 3 years combined. Next to report is Goldman Sachs, of course, before the US opened today. Eagerly watched. Well, for more on all this, let's bring in Bloomberg's Danny Berger. Danny, good morning. Now, we saw drastically different results between JP Morgan and Wells Fargo. Is there any big takeaway for the industry despite those differences?
Certainly, given the commentary we heard from these lending executives, the message seemed to be that the worst for the economy really may be yet to come. And yes, that's despite the fact that Wells Fargo had its first quarterly loss since 2008. And then the other side of things, you have JP Morgan with a second quarter profit that beat expectations pretty handily thanks to strong trading, underwriting, and investment banking, not to mention a consumer whose delinquencies weren't nearly as bad as we thought they would be. But despite that, you'd think, okay, maybe they'd say the consumer is looking strong. Jamie Dimon actually giving commentary that we'll see the effect of this recession, but you're just not going to see it right now because of the stimulus. And this was reflected throughout the different earnings results and commentaries on the various calls. Citigroup's Michael Corbat, for example, had warned that I don't think anybody should leave any bank earnings call this quarter simply feeling like the worst is behind us and it's a rosy path ahead. Wells Fargo, for its part, also said that their assumptions in the first quarter had drastically changed now in the second quarter, and that things were looking much worse than they had initially anticipated. And this view of quite a dire picture for the economy for the year to come is also why we saw such high levels of cash set aside in case of bad loans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going into these earnings, the expectation was that banks were set for their worst quarter since the financial crisis, Danny. So what can we expect from Goldman today?
Goldman should benefit, much like JP Morgan, from a stronger trading, underwriting, and investment banking results. That should somewhat help offset some of the loan loss reserves that they'll have to build up. And really the project that Goldman is likely to undertake, again, much like JP Morgan, is building themselves a fortress. This is something banks really have to do in order to deal with the charge-offs that might be coming later this year. Because you have these stronger divisions, and simply because you have the liquidity to do so, you need to build up these loan loss reserves to cope with what's to come. You need to really have a strong balance sheet. Jamie Dimon, he does talk about the resilience of his bank's fortress balance sheet. So it'll be interesting and honestly likely that we see Goldman having a really large number of loan loss reserves to undergo the same project. Another thing we should be looking out for Goldman Sachs is the commentary around the economy. Will it be like the other banks warning that the worst is yet to come? Or it could be more similar to what David Solomon said at a Bloomberg conference last month, saying that he expects a V-shaped recovery in ERA.
Danny Berger, thank you so much. Great to have you with us. Coming up, we speak to Stephen Gallo from BMO Capital Markets on a risk-on day in equities. This is Bloomberg.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Jen London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, a place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
The following is a message from PGIM.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find.
I'm moving further my stop on profit to 135.889. So stop on profit for Canadian dollar to 1.35889.
Immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we can trace the people you've been in contact with and contain the virus. So get tested and protect each other.
To get a test, go to nhs.uk/coronavirus or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
With the shift to remote working, video conferencing has become the new normal to keep your business running. But is it reliable and secure? Cisco WebEx is committed to the highest security standards and already trusted by both small businesses and many of the world's largest organizations. Call, message and meet securely with Cisco WebEx. Sign up at cisco.uk/work-from-home. When secure remote work is critical, WebEx is essential.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So, you've been holed up for a while.
Not in here!
The place has got a little, let's say, lived in. At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen or bathroom from design to show off ready. And to keep everything safe, you can book a free virtual design appointment. Plus, now there's up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Cure your house embarrassment safely with Wix. For more offer details, see wix.co.uk.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one.
Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Like right now? Get your cook on later with Asda. Get 3 for £3 on snacks like a 5-pack of Cathedral City nibbles and Dairyly Lunchables. Peckish anyone? Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Lunchables 63 grams to 83.4 grams. Prices £1.50 to £1.55. Offers end 22nd of July.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality. To make lifelong friendships. To make contacts in your chosen industry. To make a name for yourself. To make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, at Actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash, and we are seeing European stocks in the green with the FTSE leading gains up 0.8%. Similarly so for the CAC 40, the DAX up 0.6%, and the Stock 600 gaining 0.7%. US futures also pointing to a higher open. It follows a risk-on day in Asia after Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine produced antibodies in all patients. That said, we did see Chinese equities slip, and the Hang Seng currently down 0.2% after the US ended Hong Kong's special status. Now, in a couple of stock specifics, I'm keeping a close eye on Burberry, currently down about 5% after first quarter sales slipped 45%, and it issued a slightly light guidance for the second quarter. On the other hand, online retailer ASOS gaining almost 3% here in London after it saw a rebound in sales as of late. Now, if we take a look at the currency markets, the risk-on mood is benefiting commodity currencies in particular. The Noki up 0.8%, South African Rand gaining as well. We're seeing the Kiwi and Aussie dollars bid by 0.4% respectively. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index extending its decline, however, down 0.4% now. The yen is bid at 107, sterling above 126, the euro up as well at 114 this morning. 10-year Treasury yields holding at 62 basis points. 10-year bund yields flat at 45, negative 45 basis points. 10-year gilt yields slightly higher at 16 basis points this morning. Gold trading around $1,810 a troy ounce. Meanwhile, oil is bid following a drop in US crude stockpiles. WTI higher by 1% above $40 a barrel. Brent trading above 43. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. President Trump has ordered an end to Hong Kong's special status with the US. The move in the wake of Beijing's imposition of a sweeping new security law in Hong Kong drew a rebuke from China and adds fresh uncertainty for business in the financial hub. Trump also signed legislation sanctioning Chinese officials responsible for cracking down on dissent in the city. Scotland has begun its most significant relaxation of coronavirus measures since the country went into lockdown. Today, bars and restaurants can restart indoor service, while hairdressers, museums and galleries can also reopen. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says it is the biggest step so far, but also warned of a virus resurgence. And Lady Gaga has returned to the pinnacle of pop music. Gaga was the biggest pop star in the world this past month. According to Bloomberg's Pop Star Power Rankings, she dethroned Puerto Rican rapper Bad Bunny after a 3-month run. Gaga has surged to the top due to interest in her best-selling new release, Chromatic. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Bloomberg's Pop Star Power Rankings. Tell us more, Leanne.
I don't know, but I was just so excited that we even had one. I thought it was pretty amazing.
It all comes down to money. They make money. I mean, of course, we track the money. We follow the money.
And the craziest thing about it is I didn't actually know Bad Bunny at all. So I had to Google him, and I always prayed I wouldn't stay out of touch. But it's happened.
Yes. Oh, well, you've got to have all Bad Bunny's best raps. I mean, I don't know where I'd be without Bad Bunny, really and truly.
Roger, come on.
Do you have all the records, Roger?
all yes, all the 45s and 78s on my gramophone, yes.
Leanne Garens with the World News. Thank you so much. Let's get back to the markets. And Stephen Gallo, head of European FX strategy at BMO Capital Markets, joins us now down the line. Stephen, great to have you with us as always. Thanks for joining. I was saying to Roger at the top of the show, I've been off for 2 days. I come back and it is like nothing's changed. Risk on because there's some progress with a Moderna vaccine. When are we going to see FX markets move away from RoRo?
I don't think for some time. I think the 1200 level in the BBDXY is pretty rapidly approaching. That's a key level on the downside. And I think right now the Fed's balance sheet and expectations for a bigger Fed balance sheet is a driving force. We're seeing less and less usage of the Fed swap lines. We saw a pickup in Chinese exports in June in yesterday's data. that means less likely to be dollar shortages. And if anything, I think we're probably moving towards an excess of dollars in the system based on what is likely to happen with the Treasury's cash balance. And secondly, also very important, it looks increasingly like in the United States there will not be more fiscal stimulus this side of the election, and that too, I think, leaves more dollars sloshing around and doing nothing. So maybe to your point, Mayor, it's going to be a question of will we come off the risk on trade in FX markets? It's looking less likely for the time being, and that means the dollar is going to remain pretty subdued.
Well, Stephen, looking at one particular pair that is interesting in the light of perhaps some of the pressures that are driving the markets at the moment, which is to do with China, of course, the US dollar yuan pairing. I mean, it is interesting. How do you see it going in terms of what's going on out there, in not least, of course, the latest Chinese data for June?
Sure. So I think if you're looking for a sexy trade right now in FX, and if you want to put something creative on, I think you could do a lot worse than buy downside optionality in dollar CNH. We were looking at the at-the-money forward or just low delta downside puts on basically a play on significant net capital inflows into China over the next sort of 6 to 12 months or so, which would be a reversal of what we've seen over the last, say, call it a year or so. And there's also a little bit of U.S. election positioning in there. The reason I wouldn't touch spot aggressively right now, I mean, sure, there's probably some room for incremental downside dollar CNH over the near term, given what I just told Naira, but the reason I wouldn't get too heavily involved in spot is because you are weighing in directly into the geopolitical climate. The geopolitical climate right now is still very uncertain. There are a lot of uncertainties, but that is one of them. So I think if I had to put something on in that pair, it would probably look to be long downside optionality. So basically, short dollars in the option market.
All right, that is Stephen Gallo's sexy trade of the week. Stephen, when we look at equity markets, a lot of people point out the disconnect between the fact that we've got VIX elevated, but also stocks elevated. Which one is giving us the correct signal? Are you seeing any kind of dislocations like that in the FX markets?
Not so much in FX. FX is really not doing very much, but there is, I mean, based on the conversations that I'm having with people, with other market participants, there is a lot of trepidation about valuation. People don't want to add significantly to equity exposure here because they're looking at the new cases in parts of the world, in the United States, and they're wondering what that means for lockdowns going forward, what it means for third and fourth waves, if you want to call it that, in the autumn. But at the same time, they don't want to fight the Fed. And they also know that if they go short here, that is the equity market, they're going to be pretty negatively exposed to news on a vaccine, incrementally positive news on the vaccine. No one wants to miss the extension rally in equities when that happens. So, there's a lot of trepidation. People are concerned about valuation, but I think the answer is probably they're going to do nothing for the time being while they wait. And that's pretty much what it is. But, yeah, there is a lot of concern over valuation, definitely.
Stephen, let me bring you sort of right close to home in a way for us, because UK is a very interesting position, not least all the stuff about Huawei, the very dire warnings from our own Office of Budget Responsibility about the shape of the economy, and obviously the Brexit issue still hovering over. What about the relationship between, say, the pound and the euro in this context? How do you see that going forward?
Well, it looks increasingly like to me, I mean, this could change, but as of right now, July 15th at almost 9 a.m. British summertime, it looks like the government in the UK is increasingly headed towards a Brexit that is going to be in the harder end of the spectrum. So less market access to the EU, but more flexibility when it comes to tax, regulatory, and basically fiscal policy. And that tells me that when the two sides do ink a free trade agreement, call it a skinny free trade agreement, whatever you want to call it, there's probably going to be a more modest relief rally in the pound versus the euro and the dollar than there otherwise would have been if the UK was opting for a much closer relationship to the European Union. So I think that, in the short run, still think they get a deal done before the end of the year, before the deadline. I would probably look to be fading rallies north of 90, 91 or so in euro sterling. But once we get down towards levels like 87, 87.50, that's where I'd want to be a buyer. The UK is in a pretty severe, I think, economic reset, but it's also resetting its trade, regulatory, and fiscal policy too. So, it needs the full flexibility that its floating exchange rate offers it. So that's how I view the pound right now.
Stephen, just really briefly, what will be your focus for the third quarter and beyond?
Well, lots of things. We've got the U.S. election outcome. I think that probably will come down to the last 4, maybe 6 weeks of the campaign, so to speak. There's a lot of uncertainty there. Obviously, everyone's going to be looking at vaccine and also new infections of COVID-19. I think those three things are amongst the biggest.
All right. Stephen, thank you so much for that. Stephen Gallo there, Head of European FX Strategy BMO Capital Markets, joining us with an assessment of what's really quite a confusing morning. This is Bloomberg.
Sudden shocks to your...
Millions of people in the UK struggle to put food on the table. That's why Asda's donated £23 million to FareShare and the Trussell Trust since 2018. Please help us do more by donating to our Fight Hunger trolleys in store. Asda, we're all in this together. FareShare and the Trussell Trust are registered charities. See asda.com/fight hunger.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Caroline Hepker in for Matt Miller this week. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. Anna, optimism about the vaccine from Moderna still in the early stages. But then the flip side of that is this rising, or perhaps just more visible tension between China, the US and the UK.
Yeah, really interesting that from a market perspective, excitement around the vaccine, at least today, at least now, at just after 9 o'clock in London, that is outweighing concerns around geopolitical tension between the West and China, because it is the West and China rather than just the US, it would seem, certainly on the back of that Huawei news. But on the vaccine, you know, we've been talking a lot in the last 24 hours about how we maybe need to just keep our enthusiasm under wraps a little bit, given the small scale of this study. Other studies, actually, are further ahead than the Moderna one, and there were some side effects. But anyway, we will take any kind of progress against COVID-19. We will take it, won't we? And investors certainly will, and that's why we see moves to the upside. Caroline, let's check where we are on these markets. We've mentioned that the virus hopes are outweighing the geopolitics, and that is pushing stocks in Europe higher, up by around 0.75%. The FTSE 100 up 0.8%. The CAC and the DAX also making similar levels of gains. The IBEX underperforms a little and the FTSE MIB a little better than the others. From a sector perspective, it's interesting that travel and leisure is a real gainer today. I suppose if you are confident you're going to get a vaccine, then that is the kind of sector that's going to really benefit. So we see International Airlines Group and Carnival Cruises all moving to the upside on hopes and expectation of some kind of virus progress. US futures also lifted by this story because the news from Moderna, the detail of some of the trial activity that had been taking place at an earlier date, the detail came after hours in the US. So that is going to be interesting as we move through the session into the US session as well. Oil prices also moving higher with risk assets. So we're up by around 1% on the Brent price at 43.30. We have an interesting meeting taking place with OPEC Plus, of course, shortly. And the dollar moves to the downside, as you might expect with this risk on day. The dollar index is down by around 3 or 0.4%, depending on which of the dollar indexes you look at. So that's a quick look at where we are on these markets then, Caroline.
Yeah, indeed. And we've got a great lineup of guests to talk about all of those big themes and what it means for the market. So we're going to talk about Burberry, the big luxury goods maker, cutting jobs. That'll come in a few minutes with Andrea Felsted. And then we'll also do a deep dive with our Brussels edition later on this morning with Maria Tadeo, focusing on that EU Leaders Summit that's happening on Friday. So we've got plenty of guests. And in fact, one with us this morning right now, Janet Mewey, who is the investment director at Bruin Dolphin, because that positive initial result from Moderna has fueled the risk-on mood. But, of course, there's still lots of volatility because of the escalating tensions politically. And then let's not forget the near-record loan loss provisions that US banks put aside yesterday. We'll get Goldman Sachs results out later this morning. Janet, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, you argue that actually there's still substantial risks in equities. Are we in the middle of a bubble? Do you see a slowdown in terms of the ramp-up in equity market valuations?
Yeah, so I mean, the risk is always there with us because there's still uncertainty on the health front. But what we're seeing is there are consistently more positive developments. I mean, aside from the rise in cases, which could potentially because of the the availability of more tests, we see that the death rates are coming down. And of course, there's more good news on the vaccine front. And also the drug to treat the virus itself. So that's why the death rate is coming down. So these are all positive developments. And we see that economic data continues to move in the right direction. And we're just at the start of the recovery. So if we're in a recovery phase of the cycle, then it should benefit equity prices. We have unprecedented support from central banks and governments. And as a result, I mean, despite the risk out there, we still think that equities can move modestly higher on a 12-month view.
So you think modestly higher. Sticking with the earnings story, yeah. I was amused/horrified to read that there is a new gimmick, a new abbreviation we need to get our heads around, part of our new lexicon. Apparently there's a thing called EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, and coronavirus, or COVID-19, which Wells Fargo describes as a gimmick that won't be tolerated for long. But how on earth you try to untangle your results from the effects of COVID-19, I don't know. Maybe it depends on the sector. What are your expectations broadly then for earnings season? What's at stake here, Janet?
Yeah, so generally speaking, we think that the worst in the economy is over. We think that a lot of these earnings, the report, it should trough in the second quarter. So we should see the worst. And a lot of earnings revisions have already been downgraded previously. So we expect some sort of recovery in the earnings revisions in the future. And we think that, it is particularly important to watch for the second quarter updates from the companies, because in Q1, we have to live with the uncertainty. We can't really get much meaningful guidance from companies, but I think in the second quarter, they will have to start giving us more solid guidance. So we'll be watching that closely. But we expect things to be getting better on the right direction. But of course, that depends on what sector you're in.
I want to challenge you a bit in terms of your view on coronavirus, and perhaps that be remaining a risk, but that it is that at this stage. Cathy O'Neill's written a great piece on the Bloomberg Terminal about Florida's COVID-19 deaths, that Florida actually, the fatalities could get significantly worse, that people are focused on the number of deaths and not the infection rate, and that actually that's really dangerous because you're ignoring something that's sort of away wave that's about to crash on shore, as it were. How concerned are you about the state of the US right now?
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest concerns that we have in the U.S. because, yeah, as you mentioned, the trend is not great. Since there's a lag between the death rate and the cases, so that we may well see more hospitalization and capacity of hospitals getting increasingly busy. So, it is a risk out there, but what we see is that, I think the local government, we're seeing, for example, in California, once they start to see more seriousness in the problem, then they start to kind of reverse some of the lockdown measures. But that's really kind of local in nature, like state by state wide. So I think if we do see more serious cases coming out from Florida, then potentially that would be more measures. But it will still be kind of localized. It's not like a broad-based problem for the U.S. for now, which is at least some good news in the middle of the bad news. So, it is a risk, but we are not particularly too concerned about it for now.
Yeah, and I guess harshly from an economic perspective, what matters a lot is the extent of lockdowns on economic activity. And you think maybe, Janet, the bar is pretty high to have wide-scale lockdowns of any sort in the US. But we're seeing certain parts of the hospitality sector being shut down in some states.
Yeah, so we think that, it is going to be very, very targeted and localized in nature. I think it's very politically and economic and socially unpopular to have a wide shutdown again in the economy. I think that it's just not possible anymore. And as we have more good news from, say, the drug front, the vaccine front, and generally speaking, it's just, there are a few states which are concerned, but generally speaking, I think it is very hard to impose that sort of strict measures anymore. I think we just have to move on, and if there are localized cases, then those states will have to do the specific measures. But generally, I don't think it will be applied to a very broad-based measures.
Yeah, okay. Brewin Dolphin, one of the big UK leading wealth managers. You've got, as of March, £41.4 billion in total funds. So what's your take on the FTSE 100 then? Is it a case of ignoring COVID-19 here in the UK, looking past what could be pretty painful Brexit and actually looking to 2021? What's your view of the FTSE 100? There have been a lot of gyrations under the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. UK equity is not our preferred region for now. So we favor more US and Asia, Japan equities. And generally, we have been moving our equity exposure more and more from domestic UK equities towards international equities, actually. So, for us, our clients are UK-based, and so we still have, our equity allocation in the UK is quite important, but it is our view that, structurally we're less optimistic on the UK index, actually.
Thanks very much, Janet. Really interesting. We're getting some comments talking of the UK, getting some comments from the Bank of England's 10 Rayro. So this is Silvana Rayro on the Monetary Policy Committee saying that she's ready to vote for further action to help the economy. There's considerable downside risks for demand. We'll continue to watch that UK story carefully. Janet, thank you. Janet Murray, Investment Director at Brewin Dolphin.
Right, let's get over now to Bloomberg's Roger Hearing, who's got all the latest in terms of global news and more, of course, on the pandemic. Good morning, Roger.
Yeah, good morning, Caroline. The Japanese capital Tokyo's raised its COVID-19 warning to the highest level as infections spread. Meanwhile, New Zealand's Prime Minister says that country must be prepared for the virus to come back. And as US cases surge, the country's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci, is warning young people could be spreading the virus.
Even if you get infected and have no symptoms at all and never get sick, you are inadvertently propagating the pandemic. You are part of the problem and not the solution.
Meanwhile, a COVID-19 vaccine by the US drug company Moderna produced antibodies to the virus in all patients tested in an initial safety trial. However, a number experienced side effects, some of which were severe. The vaccine will move to a much larger late-stage trial this month to determine whether it will be approved by US regulators. Now, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel signalling that she could be willing to compromise in negotiations on the proposed European Union Recovery Fund. Bloomberg's Charlie Devereaux has the story.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she's prepared to compromise on a European recovery plan that will be negotiated this weekend in Brussels. EU leaders will meet this Friday to discuss a €750 billion plan that's meeting opposition from some members led by the Dutch. The Spanish Prime Minister was more forceful than his German counterpart after a meeting on Tuesday, saying the bloc must reach an agreement this month. In Madrid, this is Charlie Devereux for Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And China's called the UK's Huawei ban disappointing and wrong. Phone companies have been barred from installing new equipment for the Chinese company from the end of this year. The US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, welcomed the move, saying it advances transatlantic security. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Roger. Now we get a bit of morning sports news. Of course, here's George Alderman with a crucial result for Chelsea.
Chelsea gave their hopes of securing a place in the Premier League's top four a boost with a 1-0 win over Norwich last night. They're now 4 points clear of fellow Champions League contenders Leicester and Manchester United, having played a game more. Tonight, champions Liverpool travel to Arsenal, who are looking to bounce back from defeat in the North London derby. Tottenham continue their push for European qualification when they go to Newcastle this evening, while Wolves aim to keep their hopes alive at Burnley. Bournemouth can move level on points with the sides just outside the relegation zone if they beat Manchester City. Hearts and Partick say they're incredulous to have received a charge from the Scottish FA. The clubs have been hit with a notice of complaint for taking their battle against relegation to court after COVID-19 ended the season in Scotland early. The case is due to go to arbitration next month. And England cricketer Don Best believes they learned a lot from their defeat to the West Indies in the first test. The hosts have the chance to level the series when the second game gets underway at Old Trafford tomorrow.
Great, thank you so much for that. Sports news are coming up next. As I mentioned, we're going to delve into Burberry's results. It slumps in London trading after first quarter retail sales slumped 45%. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
The Boston Symphony Orchestra presents BSO at Home. While you stay inside, enjoy a curated collection of archived concerts and behind-the-scenes stories from BSO musicians. BSO Homeschool provides lessons for music lovers of all ages. New performances and messages from musicians are added regularly. Enjoy these selections and much more at bso.org/at-home.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Australia's largest companies are expected to slash dividend payouts over the August reporting season by the most since the global financial crisis. According to Bloomberg analysis, payments from ASX 200 firms may plunge as much as 40% this year. Let's get some perspective from Tribeca Investment Portfolio Managers, Portfolio Manager Junpei Liu, who joins us in Sydney. Junpei, great to have you on again. Is this your expectation in terms of the destruction in dividend payouts?
Look, yeah, we're absolutely expecting dividend will be cut, and as many companies has already hinted to the market, and we've seen consensus already pricing that in. So absolutely, they will have to cut their dividends.
So what does that mean for expectations of Australia continuing to be an outperformer when it comes to equities appeal?
Look, equities, first of all, when the dividend cut comes, it will be a deferral of dividends. So, once we pass the pandemic, the peak of the pandemic, we should expect a lot of those dividends to return. So if you look at our banks, they're still sitting on, very large dividend yield, even though for the short term, in the next 6 months, you won't see much of a payout. So on a 12-month basis, there's still a big dividend payout. Now, our market continue to look reasonably defensive.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Anne-Marie Horder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We're having a risk-on morning here in Europe. Investors finding hope in Moderna. That vaccine passed a key milestone, producing antibodies. It's given a boost to equities. We see the FTSE 100 up nearly 0.9%. The CAC up more than 1%. The DAX as well up 0.9%. Lifting the stock 600 is travel and leisure, up nearly 2.5% this morning. Of course, this is a sector that has been beaten down by the coronavirus. U.S. equities this morning as well point to a higher start in New York. S&P 500 mini futures up 0.7%. Bit of a mixed picture overnight in Asia. CSI 300 closed down more than 1%. The Nikkei, though, was higher. Of course, in Asia overnight, there's Chinese equities, one thing to watch. Policymakers potentially a bit uneasy and at the pace of these recent gains. Also, geopolitical tensions continue to flare between the U.S. and Beijing. Across currencies this morning, we do have a weaker dollar, stronger euro, 1.14, stronger yen as well. We are trading under 107, and then cable 1.26. And in commodities this morning, we have the OPEC Plus Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee today. It's an important one to watch out for. Potentially, we could see them start tapering those cuts, but they're going to double down on those cheaters. Oil, though, likely gaining from the drop in crude stockpiles over in the U.S. yesterday. So we have WTI crude trading north of $40 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And here's Roger Herring for more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Hungarian MPs have approved legislation to curb the growth of Airbnb-style apartments. With over 10,000 listings, Budapest relies on Airbnb rentals more than almost any other major European city. It joins Paris, Berlin, Amsterdam and others in imposing stricter terms on rentals. The U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been sent to hospital for a few days. She was admitted to treat a possible infection. The 87-year-old liberal is the court's oldest justice and a 4-time cancer survivor. And Banksy is posed as a railway worker to complete his latest piece of street art inside a London Underground train. The work features stenciled images of rats carrying face masks painted on the carriage walls, with one of the creatures holding a bottle of hand sanitizer. Since the artist posted a video of his work inside a Circle Line train, TfL has removed the art. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in this... Apologies, Caroline.
Go ahead, Anna.
9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. You see, we all want to talk about Burberry. That's why. Opinion columnist Andrea Felsted joins us now to talk about retail. Burberry warning of a material impact from coronavirus, with sales slumping 45% in the first quarter. Good morning, Andrea. So Burberry out with the results, the first luxury goods group to report. What have we learned?
We've learned just the extent of the lockdowns in Europe and the US, just the impact that has really had. The last time we got an update from the luxury group, that had only just started. So Burberry have talked about their comparable sales being down 75% in Europe and 70% in the Americas.
Yeah, I mean, that is grim. No doubt that the share price is dropping this morning. We're down 5.9% right now. I mean, frankly, that seems pretty tame, given that we're talking about 500 job losses and about a 45% drop in first quarter sales. But is it because we knew it was going to be terrible and investors are looking to the future. Is that it?
Yes, I think that is exactly it. I mean, they've talked about comparable sales being down about 20% in June, which is obviously a big recovery from the quarter. And they're talking about the second quarter being down sort of 15 to 20%. I mean, in normal times, that would be terrible. But, you know, that's just showing things are going on the right trajectory. But it just depends whether, you know, where do we go from here? Do consumers want to come back? Do we have more local lockdowns? Does that turn out to be a bit optimistic?
Andrea, let me ask you about something else in fashion, and that is ASOS. So we had numbers out from ASOS, and I thought I was across the latest news lines from the fast fashion industry, and it was all bad news, and it was all about suppliers and people not paying their workers enough. And now we get this report from ASOS about just how well they're doing. So what is the story here?
Well, ASOS definitely benefited during the pandemic because obviously we couldn't go out and shop, so we ordered online, and there were big swings in the category. So nobody wanted party dresses to go out in, but we all bought, you know, sweatpants to work from home and workout gear for our online workout. So there was a shift. I mean, the sales weren't great in the UK, but considering how bad they are in physical retail, I mean, they've definitely outperformed, and they managed to switch, from those categories that nobody wanted to the ones that people did want.
Yeah, I mean, the report this week from Barclaycard and from the BRC around UK retailing, though, I think perhaps does not bode well for the future, because actually it showed that Brits certainly are still very reluctant to get onto the high street again. So, you know, it's online where the focus really is. Is that true kind of worldwide? Because obviously Burberry, it's not just about UK sales, it's much more about Asia.
No, Burberry has said that Asia is coming back, and that was definitely something we saw the last time all of the luxury groups reported that China, Asia was coming back. The thing that we didn't know at that time, whether that was just, you know, everybody's been kept at home, everybody saved money because they haven't been able to go out, was this just revenge shopping, as it's called, or would this continue? And that's something we'll get another picture of when everyone reports. Burberry said Asia, there were good signs from China and from Korea. Part of that is because the Chinese luxury consumer isn't travelling, so sales are being repatriated at home. They warned that, you know, London, Paris, Milan would suffer because those tourists are staying away. Long-haul travel was non-existent. So we are getting that repatriation, and that was something else to watch out for.
Just briefly, Andrea, you've piqued my interest. What on earth is revenge buying?
It's the idea that because we were all cooped up and saved a lot of money, we go out and treat ourselves to something when we are able to.
I didn't even have to ask, Andrea. I got the gist of it. I absolutely got the gist.
Guilty as charged. Andrea, thank you very much. Bloomberg opinion columnist Andrea Felsted.
Great stuff. Straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, this week's Brussels edition special. We're going to look at the Recovery Fund deal. It remains likely at this week's European Council meeting. Midge Rahman joins us from Eurasia Group.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Two former NFL players have sued the league, the Players Union, and the medical board for agreeing to reduce the disability payments they received for life by tens of thousands of dollars a year. In March, the NFL and the Players Association agreed in a new labor deal to reduce payments to 400 former players who cannot work. The lawsuit was filed by Avian Kaysen, a running back with Detroit and St. Louis, and Donald Vincent Majkowski, quarterback with the Packers, Colts, and Lions. The next 4 PGA events will be held without spectators. The organizers of tournaments said that they would close their events to the public. The Chicago Marathon has been canceled due to the coronavirus pandemic. That leaves the London Marathon as the only possible remaining race this year of the world major marathons. With the Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr.
Economics.
All this doom and gloom was out there.
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
Office sanitation is more important now than ever. Disinfectants alone won't do the job because they only work per application, exposing surfaces to recontamination. BioShield Matrix is a surface coating with an antimicrobial additive that continuously kills coronavirus and harmful pathogens to create a safe work environment. BioShield Matrix is non-toxic, easy to use, and will not stain or bleach your surfaces. One application for 90 days of proven protection. Do you have the Matrix? BioShieldMatrix.com.
As shops open up again, how do we all stay safe? Fontaine runs a craft store.
We've made the shop COVID safe. If you can't keep 2 meters apart, make sure it's 1 meter with extra precautions. Know the number of customers allowed in at any one time. Use the hand sanitizer at the entrance and use contactless payments. I'm loving serving customers again, but please, to keep us open, we've all got to keep to the guidelines.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So you're out for your usual run, and the best part, you're at the end of it. Especially as you knock 7 seconds off your PB. Woohoo! How did that happen? Who cares? Now that feels like winning. So roll with it and turn today into Wednesday with a scratch card. Make today a Wednesday with a scratch card from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Search Dream Big, Play Small. Rules and procedures apply. Players must be 16 or over.
I was offered one.
I was offered one. Were you?
Yeah, I was offered one too.
1 2 1 2. I was offered one.
I was offered one. Don't take our word for it. 9 out of 10 people said they were offered a great value deal with O2. Get yours today, in-store, online, or by phone.
I was offered one too. O2 Retail Exit Survey 309 of 348 agreed with the statement. O2 offered me a great value deal. For full verification, see o2.co.uk/terms.
Nothing phases the Money Calm Bull because his bills are under control with Money Supermarket. Even this. The dentist, not a flicker of anxiety. Fox is making love. This laugh. He's calmer than a banana. So, be like the Money Calm Bull. Get money calm. Money Supermarket.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it's 9:30 a.m. here in London. A very good morning. I'm Caroline Hebke in for Matt Miller this week. This is Daybreak Europe.
This is Daybreak Europe. I'm Anna Edwards, also live in London. A warm welcome back to the programme. And an hour and a half, Caroline, into the European trading day, and European equities still flying high on hopes of a vaccine, or a little bit of news, at least, about a vaccine.
Yeah, it's only the initial trial of one vaccine from Moderna. It was 40 or so patients, but it seemed to show some optimistic signs that perhaps this initial trial would work out. So, yes, that optimism around a vaccine certainly propelled some parts of the Asian market and has helped in Europe too. We're up 0.9%. FTSE 100 gains 0.8%. CAC current up by 1 point.
I'm moving further my stop on profit for Canadian dollar to 135.879. Okay, stop on profit moved further to 135.879.
62 basis points for US benchmark yields. We're at negative 45 basis points for German yields. In the oil markets, also we've edged up actually quite a bit, 1.5%, $43.55 the barrel for Brent crude, as we see a slumping US dollar. Certainly on the Bloomberg dollar spot index, we are weaker 0.5%. So it's politics, tensions with the US versus the optimism around the vaccine, Anna.
This is the Brussels edition, Bloomberg's briefing on what matters most in the European Union this week.
This is the Brussels edition. Welcome to another episode. We're now joined by our reporter Maria Tadeo, who this week is focused, of course, Maria, on the EU Leaders Summit. It's happening on Friday. It's happening in person, which is incredible. Heads of state will be gathering in Brussels to discuss the multi-billion euro recovery fund, of course. That's as divisions continue to play out between the South and the so-called Frugal Four.
Yes, Anna. I mean, there's a lot of anticipation built into this meeting in Brussels. This is everything everyone talks about. And as you mentioned, this is probably going to be a long, tense summit. We know there's sticking points going all the way from just how big this recovery fund is going to be. How are we going to structure it? Are we going to get predominantly all grants? And then, of course, increasingly, you are seeing a debate about the governance. If this money is giving out, if a country like Italy or Spain get this windfall of money, who is going to ensure that the money is being well spent? That is a question that I hear increasingly going into the summit in Brussels.
Yeah, increasingly that is part of the conversation, isn't it? And anything that looks like a troika-style bailout, as you've mentioned to me in the past, Maria, that sort of cash for reforms, as we saw with Greece, would be a very hard sell for Italy. We saw how difficult it was to do in Greece. We saw the amount of criticism and insults that came Germany's way as a result of that. But anything that looks like a troika, outside parties coming to tell a troubled European nation what to do, that would be a difficult thing to sell. In the meantime, then, trade is keeping a close eye on any sign of an early deal, and the ECB action tomorrow also in the mix, because if we do get a deal this week, that would be perhaps considered early by some investors who maybe had prepared themselves that this might take some time to be approved.
Yes, and it could, by the way, because we're also here that there could be another summit penciled in for the end of the month if this one doesn't go through, which, by the way, we are prepping for a 3-day summit and probably very little sleep. But on that note, let's just bring in our guest who is joining us this week. It's Mujtaba Rama. He is Managing Director for Europe at Eurasia Group. He's joining us on the phone. And Mitch, I'm just going to put you on the spot. How likely do you think this deal is for the deal to go through this week?
Thanks, Maria. I'm actually quite optimistic, cautiously optimistic, I think, about an agreement. And the reason for that is, since von der Leyen, Commission President, unveiled her plan, what we've effectively seen is a negotiation over some of the detail, and the detail is, of course, important, but what we're talking about is the detail. I think fundamentally there's a recognition, even in countries like the Netherlands, where there's big opposition to elements of the plan, that Europe does have to respond to the COVID-19 economic fallout. And that the size and the scale of the intervention needs to be unprecedented. I think there's a healthy recognition of that need across all member states, and a recognition that if the EU leadership fails to reach an agreement, that could be market moving in a negative way. So I do think you have alignment on that, and I think that will ultimately propel a compromise that won't necessarily be pretty, but ultimately I think will land a deal.
So yes, so the need might drive things through. Midge, good morning to you. We've heard from Angela Merkel about the need for this to be massive. So do you think then that any watering down we do see here by the Frugal Four, by the Dutch and others, it's just simply not going to be material? Is that the essence?
Yeah, that's effectively my view. I think ultimately the landing zone is going to be very close to the Macron-Merkel initiative that then informed von der Leyen's plan. So I think, broadly speaking, the headline number 750 billion will remain intact there or thereabouts. I think Michel, the European Council President, will probably reduce the overall size of the EU budget in order to maintain that 750 on the recovery fund, which is a piece of the initiative. The balance of loans and grants will probably move in the direction of loans a little bit, again, to placate Northern Europe. You will probably see some member states' involvement in signing off reform plans, maybe even national parliaments. But I think the key issue on disbursement of the money, the Germans, the Commission, and the Council leadership is aligned that has to remain in the hand dispersed, and that could be a real problem.
And to go back on that point, because that is where the discussion seems to be headed. Ultimately, there will be a compromise deal, but the question will be on those details. And governance, it's becoming a real thing where you could be in a position where a country like Italy, who is a founding member of the European Union, gets this whole scrutiny over the way they spend this money. Is there any way in which the European Council, the leaders, you see them actually having a say in the way this money is spent?
So I think there's two parts to that, Maria. I think one is the reform plans themselves, and what reforms will member states propose, and how likely is it those plans will be legislated and subsequently implemented. And there's a question about the role of member states, leaders, parliaments being involved in that process. So that's the assessment phase. And I think for that phase, it's likely that we will see some fairly substantial member state peer review input. Then the second piece is, as I said, on the disbursement phase, and that's where I think member states and national parliaments and leaders are likely to have less agency and less influence, and we're likely to see the Commission retain a stronger hand. And as you say, that's effectively the debate now. In these two phases, both at the assessment and at the disbursement stage, what's the role of member state and national parliaments? That's really the debate, I think, heading into the summit on Thursday, Friday, that leaders are going to have to discuss.
And you use that term there, Ms. peer review. How do you make sure that this does feel like peer review and not some sort of troika imposing rules from outside?
So there's a number of things that the Commission did when drawing up this plan to make it feel different than a troika-imposed plan. Number one, most important, remember the scheme is voluntary. Right? If member states want the money, they can participate in the recovery fund process. If they don't want the money, they don't have to participate. Countries have not lost market access, so they don't have to apply for this money. They don't have to agree to reform. That's the first thing. It's voluntary, not mandatory. You remember in 2008, 9, 10, in the days of the ESM programs, countries effectively lost access to capital markets. They didn't have a choice. That's not the case now. So that's the first difference. Second is it's much more bottom-up, right? Now you're in a situation where countries themselves are going to decide and propose which reforms they want to implement. This is not top-down imposition by the ESM, by the Commission, ECB, IMF, forcing countries to adjust. It's for member states themselves to decide which reforms they're going to propose. So there's much more domestic ownership. And then there'll be a process of discussion with the member states. And that's, as you correctly say, where it begins to feel a bit troika-esque. But I still think the fact it's voluntary, the fact there's more domestic ownership, and frankly, the fact that the size of the amounts that we're talking about are unprecedented, gives this a slightly different feeling than the days of 2008, 9, 10.
And Mitch, I'm always curious when you go into a summit like this where Mark Rutte has so clearly been portrayed now as a man that's almost holding the front for fiscal rules. Angela Merkel is now on the Macron side here. He seems to enjoy this new role that he has. I do wonder, behind the scenes though, what is a political calculation for someone like Mark Rutte to play this so hardball when we know a compromise is going to happen?
Yeah, it's a great question, Maria, and it's not an easy one to answer. I think domestically, it's interesting. There's a bit of tension between Rutte and his finance minister, and his finance minister was actually on a harder line, and that didn't work well either for him personally or indeed his party. So it's not clear that there's a strong domestic angle here. I think part of it is just principle. That's just how Rutte ideologically is positioned on the question. Part of it, I think, is about punching above his weight at the European level. Part of it is about practical policy concessions the Dutch and other Northern Europeans think are important. One good example is supranational taxation in the area of environment. How is this money that the Commission is going to borrow be repaid over the longer term? Well, there are those in the Netherlands and elsewhere that have always supported the idea of more aggressive movement on the environment. If Brussels can over time develop the competencies to tax at the supranational level, there are areas where the Dutch don't want to see that happen. There are areas where the Dutch would like to see that happen. Well, that's arguably, kind of one concession that could move this along. And they do remain wedded to the mantra of, the need to reform in Southern Europe. So to the extent this does propel more reform, and reforms are necessary all across the board, frankly, in the EU, to the extent this money does catalyse more momentum behind reforms, that's arguably also in the long-term interest of the euro area as well.
And what do you make of the latest developments in East-West tension within the EU, Midge? Because if the Visegrad countries want access to the money that's available here, some of the frugal four are actually, I don't know, maybe it's the progressive four as well. At least some of those voices are suggesting there should be other criteria attached to the money if it's going eastwards around, for example, rule of law, around LGBT rights and similar matters. Where's that going to go?
So I think the most important point about the Visegrad bloc or Central and Eastern Europe is that they're not aligned in a way the frugal four are. So the Polish and the Hungarians, for example, are facing in very different directions on things like climate policy, even on the recovery fund.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel-Le-Châtel is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel-Le-Châtel, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel-Le-Châtel, a safer way to France and beyond.
Like right now? Get your cook on later with Asda. Get 3 for £3 on snacks like a 5-pack of Cathedral City nibbles and Dairyly Lunchables. Peckish anyone? Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Lunchables 63 grams to 83.4 grams. Prices £1.50 to £1.55. Offers end 22nd of July.
What have you missed the most? A haircut? A visit to the shops?
Oh, you look lovely in that.
What about a nice lunch?
Fish and chips, please.
Salt and vinegar with that. Or an afternoon in a pub garden. Fancy a casual bike ride? Or perhaps something a little more intense? Or maybe you want a relaxing day out. Whatever you've missed, get out there and enjoy it again safely. Find out how at gov.uk/enjoy summer safely.
We've got some of your faves waiting for you on Just Eat. KFC, Burger King and Subway. Spend as much or as little as you like. No minimum spend here. We'll always deliver like a G. I mean, I would know. I'm pretty G myself, thank you very much.
If somebody say, Just Eat.
T's and C's apply. Selected stores and locations.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without? With? Without? With? Without? Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors? The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
Want to get all your college sports news in one place? Turn on the Yahoo Sports College podcast to hear experts Dan Wetzel, Pat Forty, and Pete Thamel break down the latest NCAA stories from the football field to the basketball court and beyond.
I think Reggie should do a video of him running to Heritage Hall and front flipping in. Remember that famous front flipping the end zone that he did? Wasn't he the one who made that popular?
I think he was.
I think he was, yeah.
Search Yahoo College Sports Podcast on TuneIn to listen.
Is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Amber Hodor with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We're having a risk-on morning across European equities this morning. FTSE 100 up 0.6%. CAC up 0.99%. Let's call it 1%. DAX up 0.8%. Lifting the stock 600 this morning is the travel and leisure sector, nearly up 2% this morning. One of those that was hard hit by the pandemic. Giving investors this new hope and optimism is Moderna, a vaccine past a key milestone, producing antibodies. And of course, the Atlantic as well. We are seeing what looks like a firmer start would be to New York trading. S&P 500 futures up 0.6%. Asia overnight, a bit of a mixed picture. The CSI 300 closed down more than 1%. A little bit of worry there that things are just getting too fast, too quickly in terms of the equity market, but also geopolitical tensions are to watch. They continue to flare between U.S. and Beijing. We do have a weaker dollar across all its major peers this morning. Euro dollar 1.14. Dollar yen 107 bang on, and the British pound 1.26 against the greenback. And in commodities this morning, oil up more than 1 3/10% on WTI, $40.82. We have an OPEC Plus key meeting today where they look to be doubling down potentially on those cheaters that have yet to comply. But also, we had a drop in crude stockpiles in the U.S. yesterday, and that's certainly impacting the market this morning. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash, and here's Roger Herring with more what's going on around the world. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Angela Merkel says she's prepared to compromise in difficult talks on assembling a European recovery plan. The German Chancellor spoke alongside the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez as the two met in Berlin yesterday. On Friday, EU leaders will gather in Brussels to discuss the recovery plan. It's the first face-to-face gathering since the pandemic swept the continent. And researchers claim more than 1 million people in the UK have quit smoking since the virus pandemic began. A team at University College London has also found around 440,000 have attempted to kick the habit but not succeeded. Government advice says smokers may be at risk of more severe COVID symptoms. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much, Roger. Yes, well done. Keep going to all those who are trying to quit smoking. Coming up next, our colleagues in the US are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. Let's check in with Nathan Hager. He's got a rundown of what lies ahead. Nathan, good morning.
Yes, indeed. Good morning to you. Well, we're definitely looking at a risk-on field this morning with signs of progress toward a coronavirus vaccine. We're going to have all the details on Moderna's positive results showing antibody production in an early trial. We'll look at where the vaccine development process goes from here and get all the details from Bloomberg's John Lauerman. The medical news appears to be offsetting rising tensions between the U.S. and China. The president just ended Hong Kong's special status. We'll take a look at the potential market impact there. And we're also waiting for the next round of bank earnings. After J.P. Morgan's big beat on trading revenue, will Goldman Sachs follow suit? We'll preview those results with Bloomberg's Shanali Basic as Karen Moscow and I get set for Bloomberg Daybreak Americas. Hope you'll join us for it. Anna.
Yeah, really interesting to see just how much visibility these bank executives have around the provisions they're putting in place for bad debts, because everybody knows that these bad debts are coming, but getting a handle on the size and scope provisions they're putting in place for bad debts, because everybody knows that these bad debts are coming, but getting a handle on the size and scope of those will be really interesting. So good to keep track of that US earnings season. Nathan, thank you very much. Nathan Hager will be back at the top of the hour. Bloomberg Daybreak is up next. Or if you're listening in London on DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Right, let's have a conversation about the markets. Looking forward to this one. Credit is the place to be, according to our next guest. Cheaper valuations mean that investors can be recompensed even with the higher risk of corporate defaults and downgrades during the pandemic. I say during because we were still in the midst of it. Joining us now is Elga Barch, who is the head of macro research at BlackRock Investment Institute. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Look, you say that you've been underweight credit for a year. Now you've moved to overweight. What is most attractive, though, in credit right now?
The first thing I think that is attractive around credit at the moment is that we like it both from a tactical point of view and from a strategic point of view. So independent on sort of your time horizon, credit looks attractive to us. And there are sort of various aspects to it. One is investment grade, some high yield. You need to be more selective there. And then also European peripheral government debt is also an aspect of that story to seek income in an increasingly yield-starved world.
And Elga, good morning to you. What do you make of when you're assessing all of these companies and the risks attached with them? I guess that has implications for job losses and where unemployment's going to go. How much are you watching the labour market story? Is this going to be a leading or lagging indicator? Normally, of course, it lags, but I wonder if that will be the case this time. In Europe, I'm talking about here. What kind of expectations do you have for the labour market?
Yeah, so I think across the globe, we need to bear in mind that this is a very unique crisis and a very unique downturn and a restart rather than a recovery. And that also applies to how we look at data. So in Europe, obviously, a lot of labour market stabilization has happened so far through short-time work support, which will help us to bridge through the initial lockdown and the restart. But that doesn't mean that all the jobs that are currently subsidized by governments can be secured in the long run. So unemployment will likely start to rise in Europe more slowly than in the U.S. Because in the U.S. Most of the support is provided through a stepped-up unemployment insurance.
Yeah, okay. The issue, though, is whether that becomes then pretty stubborn unemployment in Europe, and it could be from places like airlines. Do you see opportunities in junk credit now, like some airlines? Wells Fargo has picked that up as an example of where they see opportunity. Is that something that you'd be looking at, that sector?
So in terms of the specific sectors, I think we need to bear in mind that there is a very profound and now very accelerated structural shift in our economies, where a number of structural trends are massively accelerated and intensified through the outbreak of COVID-19. And so you need to, when you sort of want to dive into some of the specific sectors, you need to be aware both of where current valuations are, but also what the longer-term outlook is.
And how does that structural shift apply to something like aviation, Elga? Are you assuming that we never get back to flying to the same degree because the reasons to take business trips have just been eroded and maybe people are increasingly aware of the green implications as well?
I think we will fly again, and staying close to clients is important, and that also requires meeting in person. But it could well be that we will make more conscious choices in future when it comes to air travel or generally how we travel, because I do think, as you mentioned, that climate implications will become a more important factor than it is already in the future.
Well, climate was a factor in this story. Italy's Autostrada is set basically for nationalisation, and climate is one of the issues around that bridge collapse in Italy. You know, if you look way back through this story, but it also points to something else that I think is quite pivotal in Europe at this moment, which is how much are governments going to be involved in companies. I know that Autostrada is one particular example, but what do you think about increased involvement of governments as these companies face such challenges?
Yeah, I think greater involvement of government in our overall macroeconomy through fiscal policy and monetary policy, in financial markets through various aspects of quantitative easing, and then also directly in some companies through the sort of bailouts that are also happening. I think that is something that we need to also bear in mind, and that's very necessary right now. But how this sort of evolves longer term and whether it remains to be seen.
Do we have to expect, though, Elga, that governments will have more say on how money's spent, jobs being lost, supply chains, all of that kind of thing for businesses?
I think society will be much more focused on this. If you look at what younger generations sort of are focused on, and as they become, more relevant, for instance, in the investment space where I'm working, you will see, I think, a change in social preferences, and I do think that will also be reflected in government decisions. So yes, I think there will be, through a variety of different channels, could be policy, could be direct involvement, but it's also a reflection of social preferences.
Okay, very interesting. Something that should be on our radar. Elga Barch, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Head of Macro Research at BlackRock Investment Institute, with her view on the markets on Bloomberg Radio and television today. Right, in the next hour of Bloomberg Radio, you can listen, of course, to our colleagues over in the United States, Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow with Daybreak. If you're on London DAB Digital Radio, though, you can tune into Bloomberg Surveillance. This is Bloomberg.
You have discovered new ways. I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel-good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel-good car buying, all in one place. Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
Should your kids go back to school? Ask Andrea. She's a teacher.
We're doing everything we can to keep the children safe and happy at school, which is why it's great that more of those who can are coming back, not only for their education, but for their overall well-being too. It gives them a routine, helps develop their social skills, and they get to see their friends too.
If your child is eligible, they should return to school. The government is working towards getting all pupils back in September. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global equities gain as hopes for a coronavirus vaccine lift sentiment.
Stocks in China slide after President Trump puts an end to Hong Kong's special status.
And bank earnings take center stage again with results from Goldman Sachs due out this morning.
A Long Island County executive says the coronavirus is moving in the wrong direction. Plus, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions loses to get his old Senate seat. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The latest on the sale of the Mets and on the Knicks search for a new coach.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Wednesday morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Asset managers don't get results that are off the charts when their solutions are off the shelf. Learn how SEI's operating platform can turn infrastructure into a competitive advantage at SEIC.com/IMS.
And U.S. futures are gaining this morning. 5:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 20 points. Dow futures up 221. And NASDAQ futures up 39. The DAX in Germany is up 0.9%. 10-year Treasury up 2/32 yield 0.61%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil up 1.5% or 60 cents at $40.88 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 0.2% at $18.1650. Announced. Nathan.
Karen, hopes for a coronavirus vaccine are lifting sentiment around the world. Federal researchers say initial trials of a shot from Moderna produced antibodies in all patients. We get more on this development from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
According to the results published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the neutralizing antibody levels produced were equivalent to the upper half of what's seen in patients who get infected with the virus and recover. The Moderna vaccine is one of the farthest along for COVID-19. While stimulating production of neutralizing antibodies does not prove a vaccine will be effective, it is considered an important early step in testing. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. It's welcome news for many at a time when infections continue to climb in several parts of the world.
It's a global serious situation. It's a serious situation in the United States.
Dr. Anthony Fauci tells Georgetown University he's especially concerned about a surge of U.S. cases in southern states.
It's a mixed bag. Some areas of the country are doing really quite well, and others are being challenged.
Those challenges today include more record highs for daily infections in Texas and Arizona, plus record cases reported in L.A. County, and another record for daily deaths in Florida.
Meantime, President Trump used a White House event to tout vaccine efforts.
Different vaccines being studied right now, many of which are looking really good.
While he did discuss the virus, the main thrust of the Rose Garden event was centered on Hong Kong and China. The president ordered an end to Hong Kong's special status with the U.S. and signed legislation sanctioning Chinese officials for cracking down on dissent in the city.
Their freedom's been taken away, their rights have been taken away, and with it goes Hong Kong, in my opinion, because it will no longer be able to compete with free markets. A lot of people will be leaving Hong Kong, I suspect.
Under the law, banks will be sanctioned for doing business with entities that undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. Penalties include barring executives from entering the U.S. and restricting dollar-denominated transactions. We get more from Bloomberg's Derek Wallbank in Singapore.
Market folks had hoped that these moves would stay fairly symbolic. This is not symbolic at all. This is a fundamental rethink of the United States relationship vis-a-vis Hong Kong. China has said that it's going to react in some way. There may be some retaliatory moves. We'll see what some of those wind up being. The retaliatory moves that they put out over Xinjiang were not very serious. Hong Kong could be more serious. We'll wait and see.
The law signed by President Trump will also eliminate preferences for Hong Kong passport holders and suspend U.S. extradition agreements with the city.
Those fresh tensions kept a lid on shares in China overnight, though most equities in Asia gained after positive results for that vaccine from Moderna. Bloomberg's Juliette Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliette.
Good morning, Karen. Chinese technology firms were the worst performers after some government-backed funds sold stakes in overheated tech players, particularly on the Chinex. The CSI 300 closed lower by 1.3% a day before China's second quarter GDP is released. Stocks in Hong Kong fluctuated as President Trump ended the city's special status with the US in a bid to punish China. Japanese stocks gained despite a warning from the Bank of Japan of further risk to the downside as it kept its policy unchanged. The Nikkei 225 up 1.6%. In Singapore, Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Back here in the U.S., shares of Wells Fargo fell 4.5% yesterday. The bank cut its dividend after reporting its first quarterly loss in 12 years. That's leading to speculation the dividend could go to zero. We spoke with Chief Financial Officer John Shrewsbury.
You know, we don't have an expectation of it going to zero. The level of our dividend has more to do with our medium to long-term earnings forecast.
That forecast calls for cutting costs by at least $10 billion. Wells Fargo is currently the biggest employer among U.S. banks, and it's planning thousands of job cuts this year.
Banking is changing, and we'll have fewer branches. We'll still have many thousands of branches, but we'll have fewer branches in the future. We've got more activity happening digitally from front to back, meaning that how our customers interact with us and then how we deliver capability is happening more in a more tech-driven way.
So far, U.S. banks have avoided mass layoffs during the pandemic, but if Wells Fargo's any indication, that could soon change.
Coming up today, Goldman Sachs reports earnings. We get those results around 7:30 a.m. Wall Street time. And here with a preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Strong trading revenue and underwriting fee growth is expected to benefit the bank, but they will likely be offset by lower merger and acquisition activity and higher loan loss provisions. Analysts expect a 31% decline in earnings. Revenue is seen rising 2%. Bloomberg Intelligence says Goldman's capital shortfall versus its expected requirement and its planned steps to address the deficiency will be a key focus of the bank's second quarter earnings call. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Larry. We have breaking news on Apple crossing the Bloomberg now. The iPhone maker has won its legal battle with the EU over a nearly $15 billion tax bill. It is seen as a key win for Apple and big U.S. tech. Those companies have been fighting calls for increased taxes from Europe.
And a programming note, tune in today for an interview with Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker. He sits down for a conversation at 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Television. This is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thanks very much. It's 5:07 on Wall Street. Time now to check the latest world and national news headlines. For that, we turn to Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Suffolk County Executive Steve Ballone says the numbers are moving in the wrong direction in his county on Long Island. During an online briefing, Ballone said that for the first time since March, positive coronavirus cases topped 100. Additionally, Ballone said the daily positivity rate eclipsed 2%. Governor Andrew Cuomo says some of the cases were traced back to a 4th of July party. Meanwhile, Governor Cuomo says that 4 more states have been added to a travel advisory to quarantine for 14 days. The newly added states are Minnesota, New Mexico, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Delaware has been removed. The travel advisory list now covers 22 states. Yesterday, Cuomo confirmed 912 additional coronavirus cases in New York State. And New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy disagreed with the prospect of fining travelers from COVID-19 hotspots if they don't provide contact information to health officials. Vice President Mike Pence, speaking at Louisiana State University, said President Trump made it clear that to reopen America, we need to reopen America's schools. Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
We're supposed to start school in 56 days. That is not that far off. So the conduct that we, engage in right now is going to determine whether or not our kids get back into school in a meaningful way in person. And that's why right now it is time to get more serious, push this curve back down.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll unveil the new COVID-19 relief package to senators as soon as next week. McConnell suggests the measure will include new funding for school reopenings, unemployment benefits, and money for health care providers. Former U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has lost the Republican nomination for his old Senate seat in Alabama to former Auburn University football coach Tommy Tuberville.
I just talked to Senator Sessions, and he was awesome. He said, Coach, I'm all in.
Meanwhile, Sessions commented on Tuberville, now positioned for a robust challenge to the incumbent Democratic Senator Doug Jones.
Every statewide elected official in Alabama is a Republican, except one, Doug Jones. And that has to end.
The U.S. reversed a new policy on student visas after a high-profile confrontation with Harvard University, MIT, and hundreds of other colleges, ending a standoff that could have sent thousands of students back to their home countries. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. Coming up to 5:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Good morning, John Stashauer.
All right, good morning, Nathan. When it comes to the sale of the Mets, we are down to the Final Four. The website Sportico reports there are 4 finalists. Steve Cohen, who thought he had a $2.6 billion deal last winter, then pulled out over when he could gain control. That apparently no longer an issue. His bid said to be now $2 billion, $300 million more than the Alex Rodriguez, Jennifer Lopez group. It is reportedly the preferred choice of the current owners, the Wilpons. Also in it are Josh Harris and David Blitzer, who already own the Devils and Philadelphia 76ers, and a 4th mystery bid. The Mets and the Yankees will play exhibition games this weekend. We'll see if Masahiro Tanaka gets some work. When last seen on the mound a week and a half ago, Tanaka got drilled in the head by a Giancarlo Stanton line drive. His manager is Aaron Boone.
As about a startling a moment that you can have on the baseball field. That at least in the immediate, when I saw him out there, I felt pretty good with how he was responding, and have been encouraged with his kind of daily progress and how he's responded as the workload has ticked up.
Yankees opening day in Washington a week from tomorrow. The Knicks still without a coach for next season. New York Post reports the interview with Jason Kidd went well. Kidd, of course, Hall of Fame player, coached the Nets and Bucks. Currently a Lakers assistant. He is close with Milwaukee MVP Giannis Antetokounmpo. The feeling is maybe he could recruit him to New York as a free agent next summer. Although the favorite to be the Knicks coach remains Tom Thibodeau, formerly with Chicago and Minnesota. MLS last night saw NYCFC lose to Orlando 3-1. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, as expected, no sports results in a plunge in gambling revenue in New Jersey. Figures released by the state's Division of Gaming Enforcement show the 9 casinos and 2 horse tracks that offer sports betting saw a 65% decline in winnings from a year earlier. S&P futures are higher by 18 points right now. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
The following is a message from PG.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Wednesday morning by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Like right now? Get your cook on later with Asda. Get 3 for £3 on snacks like a 5-pack of Cathedral City nibbles and Dairyly Lunchables. Peckish anyone? Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Lunchables 63 grams to 83.4 grams. Prices £1.50 to £1.55. Offers end 22nd of July.
Vision Express stores are open again for all your eye care needs. So you can now book an eye test. And while we look after your eyes, we're looking out for your safety too by following social distancing measures and using personal protective equipment. Find your nearest store and book online at visionexpress.com. We're open for you.
From Bloomberg Television, here's Heidi Stroud-Watts.
Australia's largest companies are expected to slash dividend payouts over the August reporting season by the most since the global financial crisis. According to Bloomberg analysis, payments from ASX 200 firms may plunge as much as 40% this year. Let's get some perspective from Tribeca Investment Portfolio Manager Junpei Liu, who joins us in Sydney. Junpei, great to have you on again. Is this your expectation in terms of the destruction in dividend payouts?
Look, yeah, we're absolutely expecting dividend will be cut, and as many companies has already hinted to the market, and we've seen consensus already pricing that in. So absolutely, they will have to cut their dividends.
So what does that mean for expectations of Australia continuing to be an outperformer when it comes to equities appeal?
Look, equities, first of all, when the dividend cut comes, it will be a deferral of dividends. So, once we pass the pandemic, the peak of the pandemic, we should expect a lot of those dividends to return. So if you look at our banks, they're still sitting on, very large dividend yield, even though for the short term, in the next 6 months, you won't see much of a payout. So on a 12-month basis, there's still a big dividend payout. Now, our market continue to look reasonably defensive.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise, along with stocks in Europe, while the dollar is weakening to a one-month low as progress in developing a coronavirus vaccine crossed a key milestone. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 19 points. Dow futures up 218. NASDAQ futures up 44. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32. Yield 0.61%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 1 1.33% or 54 cents at $40.83 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.1%, up $1.60 at $18.15 an ounce. The euro 1.1430 against the dollar. British pound 1.2597, and the yen 106.93. Apple up 0.8% in early trading after it won its court fight over a record $14.9 billion Irish tax bill. Today we're looking for reports on Empire Manufacturing and the import price index. They're out at 8:30 Wall Street time. Industrial production and capacity utilization are out at 9:15, and the Federal Reserve releases its beige book at 2. And Goldman Sachs is among companies scheduled to report earnings today. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Coronavirus cases and the numbers went up in 37 U.S. states. The number of COVID-19 related deaths in America surpassed 136,000. It's time to do your taxes. No more delays. A 3-month reprieve from the federal government on filing your taxes due to the pandemic comes to an end today. The decision to postpone the April 15th filing deadline to July 15th was meant to provide some economic and logistical relief for taxpayers dealing with the uncertainty brought about by lockdowns, school, and business closures. Ghislaine Maxwell will spend a year behind bars awaiting her trial. The accused sex trafficker was denied bail after pleading not guilty to charges that she was recruited and groomed an underage girl to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein. A judge in Manhattan considered Maxwell a flight risk. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. It's almost 5:20 on Wall Street. Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager. Watching shares of Moderna this morning, they are higher by more than 17% in the pre-market after word its COVID-19 vaccine candidate has cleared a key hurdle. According to a report in the New England Journal of Medicine, the shot produced antibodies in all patients tested in an initial safety trial. For more, let's bring in Bloomberg News health and science reporter John Lauerman. Good to have you with us this morning, John, and it looks like markets are encouraged by the news. How much encouragement should we take from this early result?
Good morning. Yeah, it is good news. You mentioned that the shot elicited antibodies, and these weren't just any antibodies. They were what's called neutralizing antibodies. These are the antibodies that can actually prevent the virus from entering cells, and it's a very important point, a very important step in showing that the vaccine actually works, because these would be the component of the immune system that would potentially head off an infection, and if not head off an infection, then at least prevent severe symptoms from appearing in people. Remember, these people have not been challenged with coronavirus, so we don't know for sure that it's going to prevent infections, but it's a very, very good sign.
Okay, so it's an early sign. What's the next sign we need to look for as the research continues?
Yeah, so the next step with research is to get this into phase 3 trials, which Moderna has said that they're going to proceed to, I think, in 2 weeks, they said. They're going to put the the vaccine into 30,000 people around the U.S. And then go on to see how many of those people actually do and don't pick up the virus. They'll also test it against a placebo to see whether it's more effective than not getting the vaccine, right? And so that will probably take a couple of months. They'll also continue to look for signs of whether or not the vaccine is safe. They did see some signals of safety issues. Side effects appeared. Mild side effects appeared in most of the patients who got it, but 3 people had severe side effects, and Moderna hasn't said what those were. But the tests are going forward, so that's a very good sign.
What about the sample size from this early stage trial? Does that tell us anything about whether we should be encouraged by the results?
Well, it's 45 people. I mean, this is what you do at the early stages. You test in a small number of people. All the vaccines that are in human tests right now go through this early stage. The Oxford vaccine also moving forward. There's a story out today about on the Bloomberg by Stephanie Baker about that Oxford vaccine, showing how it's progressed. But they have to go through this stage. You want to test it in a small number of people to begin with, and there's only so much you can take from it. But if the results are positive, which they are, you have to be encouraged.
Now, there was a report, I think in early May, that Moderna had put out some results from this early stage trial, and it was sort of accused of jumping the gun in terms of the kind of information it put out there. Is there any potential risk that it could come up for criticism on that front from the results that it's put out this time around?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think that, okay, so I mentioned the three subjects with severe side effects. I mean, we'd like to know more about that, obviously. Again, this is a brand new type of vaccine, never been licensed in humans before. It's It's called an mRNA vaccine, and probably a lot of listeners have heard about it, but briefly what it does is it introduces a little bit of genetic material into your cells that induces them to make proteins that the immune system raises protective antibodies against, and as well as T cells.
Yeah.
It's a brand new strategy.
And still a long way to go in terms of getting to the phase 3 trial, but certainly positive early results here from Moderna. Bloomberg News health and science reporter John Lauerman, thanks for being with us this morning to give us the details on this study. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak on a morning where futures are moving higher.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stock futures are pointing to a bounce higher at the open amid optimism that progress is being made in developing a coronavirus vaccine. Moderna's vaccine produced antibodies to the virus in all patients tested in an initial safety trial, clearing an important milestone. Facebook's chief privacy officer is calling for more transparent, standardized user data privacy policies. In a report aimed at academics, regulators, and policy advocates, Aaron Egan says customer privacy policies are too difficult for people to find and understand. Egan pointed to film ratings or nutrition labels as examples of the kind of simple disclosures she wants the industry to consider. Stocks closed higher yesterday after another volatile session. The Dow surged 557 points to 26,643. The S&P rose 42, or just over 1%, to 3198. The Nasdaq was up 98 points to 10,489. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Jenny Lynn. As shops open up again, how do we all stay safe? Fontaine runs a craft store.
We've made the shop COVID safe. If you can't keep 2 meters apart, make sure it's 1 meter with extra precautions. Know the number of customers allowed in at any one time. Use the hand sanitizer at the entrance and use contactless payments. I'm loving serving customers again, but please, to keep us open, we've all got to keep to the guidelines.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Eurotunnel-Le-Châtel is a safer way to get to France and beyond. With social distancing built in, there's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel-Le-Châtel, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel-Le-Châtel, a safer way to France and beyond.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality. To make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
Whoa, just got a Moonpig reminder that it's your birthday Saturday.
Yeah, I set that up.
Oh, do you know what? I forget one time. Okay, I'm in the app.
Oh, the romantic card section.
I'm full of surprises. Now, what rhymes with babe?
How about just uploading a nice pic? No, wait, I'm not ready.
Hey, I love you from every angle. Now for the gifts. Oh, and flowers.
Heartfelt can happen anywhere with moonpig.com. Download the app now.
Who says only the experts get to do the talking? On the Scuttlepuck NHL Hockey Podcast, irreverent outsiders Mike Bond and Dale Horde give their untrained opinions on all things hockey from the fans' perspective.
I don't know how you get those guys out of there. And Crosby, as great as he's been, it's just such a different era, so it's tough with the... he didn't have the crazy number of points that Orr, Lemieux, and Gretzky did. They just...
Search Scuttle Puck on TuneIn to listen. Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Global stocks are gaining as hopes for a coronavirus vaccine lift sentiment. Federal researchers say initial trials of a shot from Moderna produced antibodies in all patients. We get more on the development from Bloomberg's Jody Schneider.
This is an important milestone, and it raises some hopes. However, a number of patients in the trial experienced side effects, some of them severe. So this means that the vaccine now moves into a much larger late-stage trial that will determine whether it's approved by U.S. regulators.
Still, the results are promising, according to Dr. Anthony Fauci. He calls the side effects typical and not alarming. At the same time, Fauci says he's concerned about a surge of infections in southern states.
It's a mixed bag. Some areas of the country are doing really quite well, and others are being challenged.
Those challenges today include more record highs for daily infections in Texas and Arizona, plus record cases reported in Los Angeles County and another record for daily deaths in Florida.
Meantime, President Trump used a White House event to tout vaccine efforts.
Different vaccines being studied right now, many of which are looking really good.
And while he did discuss the virus, the main thrust of the Rose Garden event was centered on Hong Kong and China. The president ordered an end to the city's special status. We get the very latest from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
It once seemed unthinkable.
Okay, I'm placing an order to sell short British pound. And it's executed. 125.99. Let's put 126. No, it did not execute it. At 126. Yep. So order placed to sell short at 126 British pound.
Arrangements in Ireland were not illegal state aid. It's seen as a key win for Apple and a crushing blow to the EU's attempt to crack down on preferential fiscal deals to select companies.
And checking Apple shares this morning at 1.4% in early trading. Futures also moving higher with S&P futures up about 18 points. Dow futures up 211. NASDAQ futures up 41. The DAX in Germany's up 0.9%. 10-year Treasury up 2/30 seconds, yield 0.61%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good.
Short position opened at British pound at 126.
March, positive coronavirus cases topped 100. Additionally, Malone said the daily positivity rate eclipsed 2%. Governor Andrew Cuomo says some of the cases were traced back to a 4th of July party. Governor Cuomo also says that 4 more states have been added to a travel advisory to quarantine for 14 days. The newly added states are Minnesota, New Mexico, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Delaware has been removed. The travel advisory list now covers 22 states. Meanwhile, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy Murphy disagreed with the prospect of fining travelers from COVID-19 hotspots if they don't provide contact information to health officials. Former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville defeated Jeff Sessions in his bid to return to the U.S. Senate, a contest that had turned into a grudge match between President Trump and his former Attorney General. Tuberville leaned heavily on Trump's endorsement and accused Sessions of having cut and run on the president when he recused himself from the Russia investigation. Tuberville thanked his supporters in Montgomery.
Thank you, Alabama. Thank you for your trust, your confidence. Your message of change is loud and clear.
Meanwhile, Sessions reflected on his sometimes rocky relationship with President Trump.
And let me say this about the president and our relationship. I leave with no regrets. I was honored to serve the people of Alabama in the Senate, and I was extraordinarily proud of the accomplishments we had as Attorney General.
Tuberville will go on to face Democratic incumbent Doug Jones in the Senate race in the fall. The Supreme Court says 87-year-old Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been admitted to a hospital for treatment of a possible infection and will remain there for a few days. The Supreme Court said in a statement Ginsburg experienced a fever and chills. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 5:35 on Wall Street and time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashauer.
All right, Nathan, there's a new highest-paid non-quarterback in the NFL, and it's a guy who we last saw throwing a helmet at an opposing player. Myles Garrett got suspended for the final 6 games last season, but there's no denying how good he is when on the field. And Cleveland has given the 24-year-old Garrett a 5-year, $125 million extension. Another top defensive lineman, Chris Jones, stayed in Kansas City at 4 years, $85 million. Jones and the Chiefs beat the deadline for franchise tag players to sign multi-year deals. Doesn't appear as if there'll be a multi-year deal in Dallas with quarterback Dak Prescott. The new Patriots QB, Cam Newton's first comments since joining the Pats. He talked about being the guy to replace Tom Brady.
You have to talk about the elephant in the room, and it's like, you know who you coming after. And I'm like, yeah, great. What he was, what he is great. Needs no even talking about it. But one thing about it, though, Coach McDaniels, you're able to call some stuff that you ain't never been able to call now.
First to the New England offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, who now has a quarterback who can run. Newton was part of a conversation on Odell Beckham's YouTube channel. Baseball took until mid-July, but Yasiel Puig has a job he signed with Atlanta. 11 umpires are opting out of this upcoming shortened season. 2 more NBA players with positive COVID tests, Sacramento's Harrison Barnes and Michael Beasley, who the Nets just signed. Denver All-Star Nikola Jokic back with the team after his positive test and quarantine. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
Thanks, John. It's 5:37 on Wall Street. Time for the Tri-State Business Report with Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
A judge says the biggest movie theater operators in the U.S. will not be allowed to reopen in New Jersey for now. AMC, Cinemark, Regal, and others sued the state and the governor earlier this month over a decision to keep cinemas dark because of the risk of coronavirus transmission, even though churches, libraries, and shopping malls were allowed to reopen. The Battery at the southern tip of Manhattan flooded 10 times in the 12 months through April. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration expects it to happen as many as 14 more times. That's a big change from the early 2000s when the Battery would flood less than 5 times a year. Well, the Empire State Building is recalling employees for training in the new protocols and processes required to keep people safe during the pandemic. It's the final step to prepare for its world-famous observatory to reopen July 20th under New York State's Phase 4 guidelines. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey.
Thanks, Ed. It's 5:38 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WIOD in Miami, I'm reporting on the increasing pressure for Miami to close down more businesses to slow the spread of COVID-19.
I'm Joan Doniger telling KTRH listeners in Houston investors are waiting for the next move from OPEC and its allies.
I'm Caroline Heck on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on the Chancellor's planned review of capital gains tax.
I'm Steve Podoskin on 1010 Wins in New York. We're talking about Goldman Sachs opening its quarterly books today, along with a number of other big banks.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and for WCCO in Minneapolis, I'm reporting that starting today, Best Buy will require customers to wear face coverings in their stores.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting Nissan is making changes with a new electric vehicle and redesign of its corporate logo.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. Another story we're watching, investors questioning whether Wells Fargo's dividend will go away. The bank cut its payout after reporting its first quarterly loss in 12 years, though it says the dividend is not going to zero. We get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Chief Financial Officer John Shrewsbury told Bloomberg Radio and Television the dividend is an earnings issue and not a capital issue.
We don't have an expectation of it going to zero. The level of our dividend has more to do with our medium to long-term earnings forecast.
Speculation about the dividend comes as CEO Charlie Scharf says he'll start cutting expenses in the second half of this year and aims to eventually trim at least $10 billion of costs. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Okay, Charlie, thank you. Some other stories we're following. Texas is moving forward with efforts to persuade Tesla to build its next factory there. The county that is home to Austin, the state capital, signed off on a tax relief package. It would give Tesla a 70% property tax rebate on the first $1.1 billion the company invests. And shares of Burberry are down 7.5%. The British retailer says the coronavirus lockdown led to a plunge in sales. The company also plans around 500 job cuts. U.S. futures moving higher this morning. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com, Babbel.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
As we open things up again, how do we keep safe? Max runs a cafe.
We've worked really hard to make the coffee shop COVID safe. Keep 2 meters apart, or 1 meter with extra precautions. Follow our new one-way system. Use the extra hand sanitizer, and try to stay at your table as much as possible. We can't wait to welcome everyone back, but please remember the safety guidelines so we can all stay open.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Eurotunnel-Le-Château is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel-Le-Château, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So, you've been holed up for a while.
Not in here!
The place has got a little, let's say, lived in. At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen or bathroom from design to show off ready. And to keep everything safe, you can book a free virtual design appointment. Plus, now there's up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Cure your house embarrassment safely with Wix. For more offer details, see wix.co.uk.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
Listen, that's a dream. Everyone has them, jingling away in the back of our minds. And most of the time, that's where dreams stay. So easy to ignore. Anything can drown them out, and everything does. But at Honda, we listen to our dreams. We get right up close. And on really good days, they become reality. From 2022, Honda's mainstream cars will only be hybrid or electric. Honda, the power of dreams.
Hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Face coverings make a difference. That's the message the CDC is stressing.
Dr. Robert Redfield, the head of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, says everyone should wear a mask while out and about.
Face coverings are the key. You know, if you really look at it, the data is really clear. They work. You know, we're not defenseless against this virus.
Redfield also tells the Buck Institute masks will be a key factor in the reopening of schools. I'm John Lawrence.
Most parents say it would be risky to send their children back to school in the fall, according to the Axios Ipsos Coronavirus Index. The poll showed 82% of Democrats and 53% of Republicans say returning to school would be very or moderately risky. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll begin to roll out details of the new COVID-19 relief package to senators as soon as next week. I'm John Trout.
Pandemic information is coming at you so quickly, it's hard to react, never mind plan.
How bad do you think it's going to get?
How much more cutting do you need to do?
Here's help. Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise along with European shares. The dollar weakening to a one-month low as progress in developing a coronavirus vaccine crosses a key milestone. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 19 points. Dow futures up 233. NASDAQ futures up 39. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32, yield 0.61%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.8% or 32 cents at $40.61 a barrel. COMEX gold that'll change down $1.10 at $18.12.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1430 against the dollar. British pound 1.2607, and the yen is at 106.92. Apple up 1.2% after it won a court fight over a record $14.9 billion Irish tax bill. And today we are looking for earnings from companies including Goldman Sachs. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll begin to roll out details of the new COVID-19 relief package to senators as soon as next week. McConnell suggests the measure will include new funding for school reopenings, some unemployment benefits, and money for health care providers. Joe Biden says he is preparing to narrow the field of vice presidential hopefuls to a smaller group of finalists who he'll interview. Biden told a Phoenix TV station the background checks that have been done are coming to a conclusion within the next week to 10 days. The former vice president has committed to picking a woman as his running mate. Freshman Republican Kansas Congressman Steve Watkins, who had listed a UPS postal box as his residence on a voter's registration form, has been charged with 3 felony crimes, including unlawful voting. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's just before 5:49 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak as the second quarter bank earnings parade continues. Goldman Sachs is due to release its results before the opening bell, and Bloomberg News finance correspondent Sonali Bosick is back with us this morning to get us ready for what we could see. Good to have you back with us, Sonali. And I guess you could say J.P. Morgan set the table yesterday with that report of record trading revenue against its biggest ever provision for loan losses. Is that something of what we could expect from Goldman later today?
It sure is, because Goldman Sachs has a huge fixed income business here. The question is whether they'll post a jump that kind of matches or rivals J.P. Morgan's in some way. Now, they do have a smaller business, but analysts were expecting a 59% jump in Goldman's fixed income trading business. Can they surpass that the way J.P. Morgan has?
Can we still expect Goldman to outperform on the trading and underwriting side after the results we got from J.P. Morgan yesterday?
I mean, it's certainly possible. Yesterday, Goldman stock rose, so there certainly was an anticipation. Goldman's stock has dropped less than many of its peers in this period of time. So, that's because it's more of an investment bank rather than a big consumer bank. It doesn't have to worry about loan loss provisions at the same scale as J.P. Morgan does at this time. So outperforming is key here.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Goldman really could be helped by its limited exposure to lending. But what are some concerns that we could see for the company going forward?
Well, falling behind, really. The competition here is a big deal because Goldman is still such a big investment banking business, big trading business. A slowdown in deal making of any sort is going to impact Goldman Sachs. They also have a big investing and lending business that's becoming bigger as they grow their merchant bank. So they are more sensitive to the markets. If valuations fall a lot, their holdings will also fall, as we saw in the first quarter.
And you got to wonder whether the relative lack of exposure that Goldman has to mergers and acquisitions could be a detractor as well.
It's interesting because Goldman does feel that M&A will start to rebound at the end of this year. The idea that we'll see more distressed deals, the idea that we'll see some of the more dominant players take advantage of their war chests and low interest rates. Let's see that come to fruition. Some of these deals, the private equity industry, for example, if leveraged loan markets don't open back up, the idea of big deals get more difficult.
Yeah, and talk a little bit more about what we heard yesterday from the banks in terms of the outlook for the second half. They're still talking about a lot of uncertainty with the coronavirus continuing to dominate things. What more light could Goldman Sachs shed on that?
That's right. That uncertainty is really worrying people because in some ways the second quarter was, and this is how J.P. Morgan CFO put it, easy because there's going to be a big delayed reaction in how some of this recession plays out given how much government support we had at the beginning of the year. Not to mention the Fed's very drastic actions had really propped up markets, stock and bond markets, in a big way. Does Goldman expect that to continue?
I mean, David Solomon, and the last time we heard from him, was still talking about the possibility of a V-shaped recovery. I mean, what are the chances that he could still be that bullish on the economy?
Well, when anybody said V-shaped at the beginning of the year, they meant a bounce back from earlier levels. They didn't mean a full recovery right away. So it's tough. A lot of people, Wells Fargo had said their outlook got worse. And so did Goldman's outlook get worse is the question, or do they still feel that things will, be not where they used to be, but better than the beginning of the year?
Mm-hmm. Answer questions that we hope to hear answered in the next couple hours here. Bloomberg finance correspondent Sonali Bosick, thanks again for being with us this morning. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It's 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are being sued, accused of using people's photos without permission for facial recognition training. A complaint filed in California accuses Google of tracking users who indicated in their privacy settings they didn't want to be tracked. And the Seventh Circuit ruled that Badger Mining did not violate federal anti-discrimination law when it laid off a technician after learning she may need hand surgery. The company said the layoff was part of a larger workforce reduction.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal development we're watching. The Trump administration is backing down from a high-profile confrontation with Harvard University, MIT, and other colleges over foreign student visas. The White House rescinded a rule that would have required international students to transfer or leave the country if their schools held classes entirely online. For more on the about face, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks to Leon Fresco, a partner at Holland & Knight, and the former head of the Justice Department's Office of Immigration Litigation.
The government capitulated only 8 days after it had announced the directive. The judge announced the rescission of the directive at the very start of the hearing in Boston. What happened?
I think what happened was there were so many lawsuits that had been filed in the last 24 hours. It was going to have to be defended in so many different venues. And the fact that the net result of all of those different lawsuits would have meant that by the time you got to the Supreme Court, it would have been in the middle of the semester. I think they decided it's not worth it to have this kind of uncertainty for students here who are ultimately trying to figure out what the law is to comply by, and they can't control either what their school does or what these courts do. And the problem is the best case scenario for the administration was going to be to revert back to the guidance and literally lead to the removal of all the foreign students. And so I just think in the end, the administration just didn't want to go there because they knew that the financial impact of doing that was actually more harmful to the United States than keeping people here in the United States who are taking money from their parents abroad and buying things and renting apartments. And so all of that is actually helpful to our economy at this time, as opposed to removing those people from the economy.
So where does this leave their guidance?
So we have been talking about the concept of do they revert back to the original regulation or to March? And so what was actually quite stunning is that they reverted back to March. So the guidance is at the moment that if you are pursuing your course of study, even if it's completely online, you can do it from the United States. Now, what's still unclear is whether visas will be granted, because some embassies are opening this week and next week for people who are going to come to the United States to do only online education. At the moment, there's nothing theoretically preventing that, but my suspicion is that somewhere along the line, the administration is going to try to block that again, because it's one thing to treat the people here fairly, but it's another thing to see whether the administration will let people come to the United States for the purpose of studying online.
And that's Leon Fresco, a partner at Holland & Knight, speaking with Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. And this update brought to you by SEI. Imagine your asset management firm's operational infrastructure is a competitive advantage. Let SEI show you how at SEIC.com/IMS. We're also watching earnings cross the Bloomberg. United Health reporting a second quarter profit that beat analysts' estimates. Right now, futures are higher. S&P futures up about 18 points. Dow futures up 219. NASDAQ futures up 27. And the 10-year Treasury up 1/32. The yield 0.62%. And the yield on the 2-year 0.15%. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Eurotunnel-le-Châtel is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel-le-Châtel, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car comfortably. then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't, and I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones, and you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Wednesday, July 15th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Global equities gain as hopes for a coronavirus vaccine lift sentiment.
Stocks in China slide after President Trump puts an end to Hong Kong's special status.
And bank earnings take center stage again with results from Goldman Sachs due out this morning.
A Long Island County executive says the coronavirus is moving in the wrong direction. Plus, former Attorney General Jeff Sessions loses to get his old Senate seat. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The latest on the sale of the Mets and on the Knicks search for a new coach.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. futures are gaining this morning, coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 18 points. Dow futures up 215. NASDAQ futures up 31. The DAX in Germany's up 1%. CAC in Paris up 1.3%. And the FTSE 100 up 0.8%. 10-year Treasury up 1/32. Yield 0.62%. Yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.9% or 38 cents at $40.67 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.1% or $2.10 at $18.1130 an ounce. The euro 1.1428 against the dollar. Yen 106.93. Nathan.
And Karen, hopes for a coronavirus vaccine are lifting sentiment. Federal researchers say initial trials of a shot from Moderna produced antibodies in all patients. We get more on the development from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
According to the results published in the New England Journal of Medicine, the neutralizing antibody levels produced were equivalent to the upper half of what's seen in patients who get infected with the virus and recover. The Moderna vaccine is one of the farthest along for COVID-19. While stimulating production of neutralizing antibodies does not prove a vaccine will be effective, it is considered an important early step in testing. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Charlie, thank you. It's welcome news for many at a time when infections continue to climb in several parts of the world.
It's a global serious situation. It's a serious situation in the United States.
Dr. Anthony Fauci tells Georgetown University he's especially concerned about a surge of U.S. cases in the South.
It's a mixed bag. Some areas of the country are doing really quite well, and others are being challenged.
Those challenges today include more record highs for daily infections in Texas and Arizona, plus record cases reported in L.A. County, and another high for daily deaths in Florida.
Meantime, President Trump used a...
Meantime, President Trump used a White House event to tout vaccine efforts.
Different vaccines being studied right now, many of which are looking really good.
The president also announced major moves on Hong Kong and China. He ordered an end to Hong Kong's special status with the U.S. and signed legislation sanctioning Chinese officials for cracking down on dissent in the city.
Their freedom's been taken away, their rights have been taken away, and with it goes Hong Kong, in my opinion, because it will no longer be able to compete with free markets. A lot of people will be leaving Hong Kong, I suspect.
Under the law, banks will be sanctioned for doing business with entities that undermine Hong Kong's autonomy. Penalties include barring executives from entering the U.S. and restricting dollar-denominated transactions. We get more from Bloomberg's Derek Walbank in Singapore.
Market folks had hoped that these moves would stay fairly symbolic. This is not symbolic at all. This is a fundamental rethink of the United States relationship vis-a-vis Hong Kong. China has said that it's going to react in some way. There may be some retaliatory moves. We'll see what some of those wind up being. The retaliatory moves that they put out over Xinjiang were not very serious. Hong Kong could be more serious. We'll wait and see.
And the law signed by President Trump will also eliminate preferences for Hong Kong passport holders and suspend U.S. extradition agreements with the city. Those fresh tensions kept a lid on shares in China overnight, though most equities in Asia gained after positive results from that vaccine from Moderna. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with the details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Karen. Chinese technology firms were the worst performers after some government-backed funds sold stakes in overheated tech players, particularly on the Chinex. The CSI 300 closed lower by 1.3%. A day before China's second quarter GDP is released, stocks in Hong Kong fluctuated as President Trump ended the city's special status with the U.S. in a bid to punish China. Japanese stocks gained despite a warning from the Bank of Japan of further risk to the downside as it kept its policy unchanged. The Nikkei 225 up 1.6%. In Singapore, Juliet Sali, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thanks. Back here in the U.S., shares of Wells Fargo fell 4.5% yesterday. The bank cut its dividend after reporting its first quarterly loss in 12 years. That's leading to speculation the payout could go to zero. We spoke with Chief Financial Officer John Shrewsbury.
We don't have an expectation of it going to zero. The level of our dividend has more to do with our medium to long-term earnings forecast.
That forecast calls for cutting costs by at least $10 billion. Wells Fargo is currently the biggest employer among U.S. banks and is planning thousands of job cuts this year.
Banking is changing, and we'll have fewer branches. We'll still have many thousands of branches, but we'll have fewer branches in the future. We've got more activity happening digitally from front to back, meaning that how our customers interact with us and then how we deliver capability is happening more in a more tech-driven way.
So far, U.S. banks have avoided mass layoffs during the pandemic, but if Wells Fargo is any indication, that could soon change.
Coming up today, Goldman Sachs reports earnings. We get those results around 7:30 a.m. Wall Street time. And here with the preview is Bloomberg's Larry Kofsky.
Strong trading revenue and underwriting fee growth is expected to benefit the bank, but they will likely be offset by lower merger and acquisition activity and higher loan loss provisions. Analysts expect a 31% decline in earnings. Revenue is seen rising 2%. Bloomberg Intelligence says Goldman's capital shortfall versus its expected requirement and its planned steps to address the deficiency will be a key focus of the bank's second quarter earnings call. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Larry. Apple has won its battle with the EU over nearly $15 billion in taxes. A court sided with the iPhone maker, saying its tax arrangements in Ireland were not illegal state aid. It is seen as a key win for Apple and a crushing blow to the EU's attempt to crack down on preferential fiscal deals to select companies.
And tune in today for an interview with Philadelphia Fed President Patrick Harker. He sits down for a conversation with Bloomberg Radio and Television this morning, 8:30 a.m. Wall Street time.
And now it's 6:07 on Wall Street. We check in with Michael Barr for the latest world and national news headlines. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Suffolk County Executive Steve Malone says the numbers are moving in the wrong direction in his county on Long Island. During an online briefing, Malone says that for the first time since March, positive coronavirus cases topped 100. Additionally, Malone said the daily positivity rate eclipsed 2%. Governor Andrew Cuomo says some of the cases were traced back to a 4th of July party. Meanwhile, Governor Cuomo says that 4 more states have been added to a travel advisory to quarantine for 14 days. The newly added states are Minnesota, New Mexico, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Delaware has been removed. The travel advisory list now covers 22 states. Yesterday, Cuomo confirmed 912 additional coronavirus cases in New York State. Meanwhile, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy disagreed with the prospect of fining travelers from COVID-19 hotspots if they don't provide contact information to health officials. Vice President Mike Pence, speaking at Louisiana State University, said President Trump made it clear that to reopen America, we need to reopen America's schools. Michigan's Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
We're supposed to start school in 56 days. that is not that far off. So the conduct that we, engage in right now is going to determine whether or not our kids get back into school in a meaningful way in person. And that's why right now it is time to get more serious, push this curve back down.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says he'll unveil the new COVID-19 relief package to senators as soon as next week. McConnell suggests the measure will include new funding for school reopenings, unemployment benefits, and money for health care providers. Former U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has lost the Republican nomination for his old Senate seat in Alabama to former Auburn University football coach Tommy Tuberville.
I just talked to Senator Sessions, and he was awesome. He said, Coach, I'm all in.
Meanwhile, Sessions commented on Tuberville now positioned for a robust challenge to the incumbent Democratic Senator Doug Jones.
Every statewide elected official in Alabama is a Republican, except one, Doug Jones. And that has to end.
The U.S. reversed a new policy on student visas after a high-profile confrontation with Harvard University, MIT, and hundreds of other colleges, ending a standoff that could have sent thousands of students back to their home countries. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's almost 6:10 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, when it comes to the sale of the Mets, we're down to the final four. The website Sportico reports there are four finalists. Stephen Cohen thought he had a $2.6 billion deal last winter and then pulled out over when he could gain control, but that apparently no longer is an issue. His bid said to be now $2 billion, $300 million more than the Alex Rodriguez Jennifer Lopez group that is reportedly the preferred choice of the current owners, the Wilpons. Also in it are Josh Harris and David Blitzer, who already own the Devils and Philadelphia 76ers, and a fourth mystery bid. Mets and Yankees will play exhibition games this weekend. We'll see if Masahiro Tanaka gets some work. When last seen on the mound a week and a half ago, Tanaka got drilled in the head by a Giancarlo Stanton line drive. His manager is Aaron Boone.
As about a startling a moment that you can have on the baseball field. That at least in the immediate, when I saw him out there, I felt pretty good with how he was responding. And a bit.
Well, I'm moving my stop on profit for Canadian dollar to 135.789. Okay, so stop on profit at 135.789.
CFC lose to Orlando 3-1. John Stashauer, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan.
And John, as expected, no sports means a plunge in gambling revenue in New Jersey. Figures from the New Jersey Division of Gaming Enforcement show the 9 casinos and 2 horse tracks that offer sports betting saw a 65% decline in winnings from a year earlier. S&P futures higher by 25 points. Dow futures up 265. This is Bloomberg.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Mark Baribeau, the head of Global Equity at Jennison Associates.
You're looking at bigger implications of technology playing a role in keeping us all connected, giving us access to information or goods very quickly. So we don't see any of those trends changing. In fact, they're likely to accelerate. There's some new things that have come along, though, that people might find useful, like telemedicine. There were skeptics about that, and I think the more people using it, especially the more doctors are using it today, the more they're liking it. You can see more patients. It can be more effective. It might actually be a better solution.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's pgim.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately. so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers...
How do we control coronavirus now? Listen to Steph. She's a bus driver.
Now that people are using public transport again, we really need to make sure that we keep each other safe. Passengers need to stay 2 metres apart. If that's not possible, make it at least 1 metre. I want to see everyone wearing face coverings over their mouth and nose, unless you've got a good reason not to. And when you get to where you're going, you need to wash your hands. We've still got to play our part.
Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Ever wondered how people's postcode lottery works? Easy. Your postcode is your ticket. And every weekday it gives you the chance to win £1,000 or £30,000 every weekend. And every month players in your postcode could win a share of £3 million. Join in at postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 23rd of July to play in the August draws. PPL manage lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus. Conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Eurotunnel Le Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond, with social distancing built in. There's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
At Wix, we know tradespeople have been keeping the homes of the UK safe and sound. So we know you need to get back out on the job quickly. Get instant access to your 10% discount with the Wix Trade Pro app and shop with us in store, click and collect, or have your order delivered. Not a member? Download the app to register. Always cheaper with Wix Trade Pro. Terms apply.
Tuesdays at KFC gonna get you like, wow, pow, chow, kapow, get down right now. If you know how, then take a bow. Because this deal's gonna raise a brow. Get 9 pieces of original recipe chicken for an eye-popping $5.99. What the? Every Tuesday at KFC. Participating restaurants ends 18th of August 2020. Tuesdays only, subject to availability, not available online.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Now, the coronavirus pandemic has transformed the landscape of healthcare with rapid shifts to telehealth. Joining us now to discuss the surge in demand and what lies ahead for telemedicine is Amir Rubin. He is the CEO of One Medical. It is a San Francisco-based primary care platform. Amir, great to have you. And I guess the first simple question is, what demand shifts have you been seeing really since February, March, when the coronavirus pandemic really came to a head here, and how that's transitioned now into sales in July?
Yeah, great to be with you, Taylor. So at One Medical, we combine digital health and multi-modalities for digital health. That could be synchronous video, on-demand video chat. It could be messaging. It could be structured questions with in-person care and testing. So we were kind of set up pretty well to deal with COVID. So during this time, we saw a huge influx of digital health, but not just video chats, but, hey, can I get screened for COVID? Do I have the symptoms? And then we saw people get on our app and book testing. And we set up testing sites in full PPE across the country in our various locations. So certainly saw an influx of demand there.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And at 6:17 on Wall Street, and futures this morning are on the rise, while the dollar is weakening to a one-month low as progress in developing a coronavirus vaccine crosses a key milestone. And we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 26 points. Dow futures up 261, and NASDAQ futures up 53. The DAX in Germany is up 1.2%. 10-year Treasury, little change, yield 0.62%. Yield on the 2-year, 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 0.99% or 35 cents at $40.64 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.25% or $4 to $18.0930 an ounce. The euro 1.1432 against the dollar, British pound 1.2622, and the yen's at 106.92. And today we are watching for reports on Empire Manufacturing and the import price index at 8:30 Wall Street time. Industrial production and capacity utilization out at 9:15. And the Federal Reserve releases its beige book at 2. And Goldman Sachs is among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, coronavirus cases went up in 37 U.S. states. The number of COVID-19 related deaths in America surpassed 136,000. It is time to do your taxes. No more delays. A 3-month reprieve from the federal government on filing your taxes due to the pandemic comes to an end today. The decision to postpone the April 15th filing deadline to July 15th was meant to provide some economic and logistical relief for taxpayers dealing with the uncertainty brought about by lockdowns, school, and business closures. Ghislaine Maxwell will spend a year behind bars awaiting her trial. The accused sex trafficker was denied bail after pleading not guilty to charges that she was recruited and groomed underage girls to have sex with Jeffrey Epstein. A judge in Manhattan considered Maxwell a flight risk. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. It's 6:19 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak, and let's get more now on the surge in coronavirus that we're continuing to see in this country. Andy Pekos is back with us this morning, professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And we just heard it from Michael, Professor Pekos. Cases are up in 37 states. We're also seeing rising hospitalizations in the largest state in this country, California, and just yesterday a record number of deaths reported in Florida, which is emerging as another major hot spot. What is your level of concern about the surge that we're seeing right now?
I mean, my level of concern is probably the highest that I could probably voice right now. This is as close to the nightmare wrong scenario as we could have envisioned in terms of rolling back our public health interventions and trying to opening up our society to more activities. This is clearly a sign that the interventions that were put in place were not held long enough or were not as effective enough in getting the case numbers down to a manageable level. And now we're back in a worse situation than when we were initially seeing the virus here in this country, when we were much less prepared to deal with it.
Now, of course, we've heard from members of the White House Coronavirus Task Force, including most prominently in recent days Admiral Brett Giroir, the Assistant Health Secretary. He's been saying that this country is in a better place than it was during the first surge back in April because we have better equipment and more testing going on. Are those reassurances warranted?
I think what you need to look at is the number of cases, the number of hospitalizations, and the number of deaths to really get the bottom line in terms of how effective our response is right now. And I'll bring up the point that I've brought up on this show many times before. If you look at other countries around the world, even if you look at other states here within the United States, the way the curve is looking with this second wave of cases coming through is something that hasn't been seen in many other countries and in some states. We know how to keep these case numbers down. It just takes a political will, it takes some leadership, and it takes better implementation of these strategies to make sure that we can accomplish those goals.
Of course, the loudest voices we're hearing in terms of political will are calling for schools to reopen with more in-person instruction in the next month or so. Many schools are going to reopen in some capacity before Labor Day. Can we do that safely?
Absolutely. I think there is a way to incorporate in-person learning into all of our schools. Now, it won't be the way it was before December 2019 because the virus is still around, and we have to avoid some of those situations such as crowding in small indoor spaces, which we're very clear about. Those are places where transmission can occur at high frequency. Now, the other thing that can't happen, though, is these things can't be rolled out if there's a large number of cases in a particular locality. Because, again, if you have a large number of cases in the community and you're sending children together into a small confined space, you really are doing the opposite of what's a good public health intervention. Children are less susceptible to severe disease, but we're still trying to understand how children play a role in terms of transmitting the virus within the community and within households. So we still need to know more about keeping our children safe and keeping our community safe when it comes to rolling out schools.
Is there a difference between crowding kids in schools and the concern that Dr. Fauci raised as late as yesterday about young people crowding into bars? Is it a different kind of environment?
It is, but the principle is basically the same. You want to avoid having too many people in a small confined space where they come, especially in conditions where there's going to be a lot of talking, a lot of coughing, and people in the same area. So the same driving principle is present there. Obviously, the need to get kids in schools is a little bit more pressing than the need to get people into bars, if I could say it that way. But the same principle is there. You want to avoid those crowded areas where multiple people are coming together and where they're going to be talking and communicating to each other and setting up those conditions where virus can be spread very easily.
It's always so helpful getting your insights, Professor. Thanks again, as always, for being with us. Andy Pekos is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And a reminder, you can get all the very latest on the pandemic at Bloomberg.com/coronavirus or VRUS Go on the Bloomberg terminal, including the latest details on some positive initial results from Moderna's vaccine candidate. S&P futures are higher by 26 points. Dow futures up 282. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Wall Street looks headed for a higher open today on optimism over progress in developing a coronavirus vaccine. Stocks closed higher yesterday after another volatile session. The Dow surged 557 points. The COVID-19 vaccine from Moderna produced antibodies to the coronavirus in all patients tested, clearing an important milestone. The Moderna vaccine now moves into a much larger late-stage trial later this month that's likely to determine whether it's approved by U.S. regulators. GlaxoSmithKline has taken a step forward in its bid for U.S. approval of a novel blood cancer drug after a panel advising the Food and Drug Administration voted in favor of its use. Starting today, Best Buy joins other retailers in implementing a face mask wearing requirement for customers in its stores to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Exceptions are small children and people unable to wear a mask because of health reasons. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
I've always wanted to learn another language, but every time I try, it never sticks. So I decided to give Babbel a try, and I really like the teaching method of the app. I started with the beginner lesson on Babbel, and it starts with simple words and phrases, and soon you're putting those words into a conversation. Each lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and they're all really different, which keeps things interesting. The app is really smart. It actually keeps track of the words I'm struggling with so I can practice them and get better. I chose Babbel because it was created by real language teachers. They built it around real life, how people actually communicate, and what they care about. I can't wait to use my new language skills in the real world. Dos cervezas, por favor.
With Babbel, get conversational in Spanish, French, German, and more. It just takes 10 to 15 minutes a day. Now try Babbel free. Just go to Babbel.com and start learning a new language today. That's Babbel.com. Babbel.com.
Millions of people in the UK struggle to put food on the table. Since 2018, Asda's donated £23 million to Fair Share and the Trussell Trust across the UK, which has helped more than 200,000 people. Please help us do more by donating to our Fight Hunger trolleys in store. Asda, we're all in this together. Fair Share and the Trussell Trust are registered charities. See asda.com/fight hunger.
Eurotunnel-Le-Shuttle is a safer way to get to France and beyond. With social distancing built in, there's no scrum at security, hanging around for your bags, or shouldering strangers in your seat. With Eurotunnel-Le-Shuttle, simply drive on at Folkestone and stay in your car, comfortably. Then drive off 35 minutes later. Stay safe. Go Tunnel, Eurotunnel, Le Shuttle, a safer way to France and beyond.
Now you can make and receive EE calls hands-free with Alexa. Get an Amazon Echo device for only £4 a month. Over 11 months with no upfront cost, and your hands could also be rustling up a bacon family special or installing that... Alexa, call Handyman Gary again.
Calling Handyman Gary.
EE calls with Alexa, another handy perk from the UK's #1 network. Text Alexa to 150 to get started.
Pay monthly customers with a compatible phone and Alexa device. #1 for network performance. Verify rootmetrics.co.uk. Terms apply.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable. The lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda. The power of dreams.
Just one cornetto.
Aidan, love, your mum's on the phone.
Give it to me. No, the phone I mean.
Aidan, is that you?
Give me cornetto. Your turn, Mum. Sing it.
Oh, from Walls Ice Cream.
Yes, Mum. Love it.
Deliciously creamy, crunchy wafer cone, and the secret chocolate hidden in the tip. Connect with the ones you love this summer. There's just one Cornetto from Walls Ice Cream.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 6:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 3 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. Global stocks are gaining as hopes for a coronavirus vaccine lifts sentiment. Federal researchers say initial trials of a shot from Moderna produced antibodies in all patients. And we get more on the development from Bloomberg's Jody Schneider.
This is an important milestone, and it raises some hopes. However, a number of patients in the trial experienced side effects, some of them severe. So this means that the vaccine now moves into a much larger late-stage trial that will determine whether it's approved by U.S. regulators.
And there's also word that positive news is coming on Oxford University's COVID-19 vaccine that, according to British journalist Robert Peston, the reporter for ITV says Oxford's vaccine is, quote, generating the kind of antibody and T-cell response that researchers hope to see.
Now, when it comes to Moderna's shot, Dr. Anthony Fauci calls its side effects typical and not alarming. At the same time, Fauci says he is concerned about a surge of infections in southern states.
It's a mixed bag. Some areas of the country are doing really quite well, and others are being challenged.
Now, those challenges today include more record highs for daily infections in Texas and Arizona, plus record cases reported in L.A. County and another record for daily deaths in Florida.
Meantime, President Trump used a White House event to tout vaccine efforts.
Different vaccines being studied right now, many of which are looking really good.
The president also announced major moves on Hong Kong and China. He ordered an end to the city's special status. We get the very latest from Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis in Hong Kong.
It once seemed unthinkable, but the president carried through with his earlier threat. He also signed legislation that would sanction Chinese and Hong Kong officials. It's all tied to China imposing a national security law here. So now Hong Kong gets no different treatment from China in these areas. Tariffs, visas, extradition, license exceptions on certain exports, police exchanges, and even the Fulbright program. China issued an immediate rebuke and said it would sanction U.S. officials. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Brian, thank you. And on the corporate front, Apple has won its battle with the EU over nearly $15 billion in taxes. A court sided with the iPhone maker, saying its tax arrangements in Ireland were not illegal state aid. It's seen as a key win for Apple and a crushing blow to the EU's attempt to crack down on preferential fiscal deals to select companies.
And we're watching shares of Apple up 1.7% in early trading. Futures also higher. S&P futures up 30 points. Dow futures up 308. NASDAQ futures up 57. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Karen. It's 6:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. A county executive on Long Island says the numbers are moving in the wrong direction involving COVID-19 cases. During an online briefing, Suffolk County Executive Steve Malone says that for the first time since March, positive coronavirus cases topped 100. Additionally, Malone said the daily positivity rate eclipsed 2%. Governor Andrew Cuomo says some of the cases were traced back to a 4th of July party. Governor Cuomo also says that 4 more states have been added to a travel advisory to quarantine for 14 days. The newly added states are Minnesota, New Mexico, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Delaware has been removed. The travel advisory list now covers 22 states. Meanwhile, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy disagreed with the prospect of fining travelers from COVID-19 hotspots if they don't provide contact information to healthcare officials. Former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville defeated Jeff Sessions in his bid to return to the U.S. Senate, a contest that had turned into a grudge match between President Trump and his former Attorney General. Tuberville leaned heavily on Trump's endorsement and accused Sessions of having cut and run on the president when he recused himself from the Russia investigation. Tuberville thanked his supporters in Montgomery.
Thank you, Alabama. Thank you for your trust, your confidence. Your message of change is loud and clear.
Meanwhile, Sessions reflected on his sometimes rocky relationship with President Trump.
And let me say this about the president and our relationship. I leave with no regrets. I was honored to serve the people of Alabama in the Senate, and I was extraordinarily proud of the accomplishments we had as Attorney General.
Tuberville will go on to face Democratic incumbent Doug Jones in the Senate race in the fall. It took a while to count the votes, but Mondaire Jones has won a Democratic primary for a congressional seat opening up in New York's 17th District. Jones is an attorney who had the backing of the party's left wing. Current Representative Nina Lowey is retiring. The Supreme Court says 87-year-old Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been admitted to a hospital for treatment of a possible infection and will remain there for a few days. The Supreme Court said in a statement Ginsburg experienced a fever and chills. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's coming up to 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Burden Accountants and Advisors Sports Report. Here's John Stashower.
All right, Nathan, there's a new highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, and it's a guy who we last saw throwing a helmet at an opposing player. Myles Garrett got suspended for the last 6 games of the last season, but no denying how good he is when on the field, and Cleveland has given the 24-year-old Garrett a 5-year, $125 million extension. Another top defensive lineman, Chris Jones, staying in Kansas City at 4 years, $85 million. If you're wondering how the Chiefs can afford him and Patrick Mahomes, that mega deal with Mahomes doesn't kick in until 2022. The new Patriots quarterback Cam Newton's first comments since joining the Pats, he talked about being the guy to replace Tom Brady.
I have to talk about the elephant in the room, and it's like, know you who you coming after. And I'm like, yeah, great. What he was, what he is great. Needs no even talking about it. But one thing about it, though, Coach McDaniels, you're able to call some stuff that you ain't never been able to call now.
The New England offensive coordinator, Josh McDaniels, who now has a QB who can run. Newton was part of a conversation on Odell Beckham YouTube channel. Baseball took till mid-July, but Yasiel Puig has a job. He signed with Atlanta, whose right fielder Nick Markakis chose to opt out. 11 umpires are opting out of the shortened season, but not 67-year-old Joe West, who's approaching the record for most games umpired in MLB history. 2 more NBA players with positive COVID tests, Sacramento's Harrison Barnes and Michael Beasley, who the Nets just signed. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. David.
Thank you, John. It's 6:37 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
Delta's grim outlook offers encouragement, too. I'm Brooke Sutherland, a columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. Delta followed rival United Airlines in dialing back its August flying schedule. Delta will add...
Okay, we closed position on Canadian dollar at 135.789. You guys who followed me from morning from 8 o'clock, well done. We made 2,000 pounds. Okay? So it goes from, I'll show you right now, from here to here. Total profit, 2,000 pounds. Well done.
Front today, we get a reading on industrial production. Economists predict a 4.4% increase for June. Here with more is Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
In May, industrial production started a gradual recovery from historic lows, edging 1.4% higher, the largest increase in almost 3 years. Manufacturing output was up, but utility and mining output declined. Looking ahead, Bloomberg Economics anticipates weakness in business investment will stymie output. Also on today's data calendar, the Fed's Beige Book survey, the New York Fed's Factory Index, and the Import Price Index. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Vinny. Now, investors are questioning whether Wells Fargo's dividend will go away. The bank cut its payout after reporting its first quarterly loss in 12 years, though it says the dividend is not going to zero. We get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Chief Financial Officer John Shrewsbury told Bloomberg Radio and Television the dividend is an earnings issue and not a capital issue.
We don't have an expectation of it going to zero. The level of our dividend has more to do with our medium to long-term earnings forecast.
Speculation about the dividend comes as CEO Charlie Scharf says he'll start cutting expenses in the second half of this year and aims to eventually trim at least $10 billion